Today, my daughter Jennifer turns 18 years old. Jennifer is a beautiful girl. Strawberry blonde hair, blue eyes, height about 165 centimeters, and weight just over 56 kilograms. She resembled Molly, my wife, in appearance. Molly is also a very beautiful woman, 48 years old, with long natural blonde hair and lovely blue eyes. Her looks are a family trait, inherited from her parents who immigrated to the United States from Norway. She is perhaps even more beautiful now than when I first met her. Molly and I have been married for just over 20 years, and most of those years have been happy ones. Jennifer arrived in our second year of marriage, and due to complications, Molly was no longer able to have children. This was fine with us because we both adored Jennifer and didn't feel the need to have more children. Jennifer was always very popular, and there were always plenty of young people in our house, so we never lacked the hustle and bustle. My wife and I had some surprises planned for Jennifer's birthday to make the day truly special. We decided to have a birthday dinner so we could give her gifts without waiting for the party her friends were planning for the end of the week. We tried very hard not to spoil Jennifer too much, and I think we succeeded. She is a good student, has always been a wonderful daughter who has never had any problems, and has earned our trust and respect with her behavior. The gifts were meant to be a reward for the happiness she brought us as our daughter. We told her to come home for dinner so we could give her our gifts. We hope to surprise her and make this birthday one to remember for a long time. I'm sure she will remember this day for a long time. Molly was busy in the kitchen preparing Jennifer's favorite dishes for this special dinner. She spent a week thinking about what to cook from what Jennifer especially liked. The menu included boneless, skinless chicken breasts fried and then baked in white sauce, julienne potatoes, and green bean casserole, all her favorites. I checked with Molly to see if everything was going according to plan and said that I had a couple of surprises that I would give them both after the main gifts were presented. Molly wanted to know the details, but I insisted that she should wait. Jennifer got home early and tried to help in every possible way, mostly by getting in the way and urging her to make things go faster. But despite her help, dinner was finally served, and it turned out great. At dinner, we talked in the usual family manner and discussed all the things that ordinary families talk about. Jennifer was talking about her plans for her high school graduation and how she had been asked to host an early morning breakfast at our house for 20-30 seniors who would be looking for somewhere to eat after a night of dancing and other craziness. For me, this moment was bittersweet. The three of us sat together, excited about what lay ahead, but at the same time, I had doubts about my future with Molly and my future relationship with Jennifer. These doubts were connected precisely with the surprises that I had prepared for both of them. Only time could tell if I was right in what I was about to do. For my part, I felt that I had no choice. When dinner finally came to an end, we cleared the table, made coffee, and, looking at each other, I started talking. Jen, your mom and I are so proud of you and everything you've accomplished. You're graduating with honors this year, and I know you've already been accepted to the University of Miami, your first choice. We would like you to study at a university closer to home, but we know that Miami has been your dream for a long time. We will miss you, but since you really want to go there. Jennifer looked like she was ready to explode with impatience, but she just smiled and said that she wanted to go to Miami because it had everything she needed. She added that she would be able to come home all holidays, and we would be able to visit her, especially when it was cold here in Cleveland. She mentioned that she was still hoping to get some kind of scholarship to Miami, but expressed doubts. I want to pay for as much of my education as possible, even though you offered to pay for everything, she said. Well, we both understand that Miami is your choice, and we accept that. Either way, we are very proud of you and will support whatever you decide to do, I said. You are a special girl, thanks to the best parents in the world. With such support, I simply could not be different, she exclaimed, jumping up and down in her chair. I don't want to seem greedy, but where are the gifts? I looked at Molly. You start, you have the most fun gift, and let it set the tone. Molly took a keychain from her purse and held it up so Jennifer could see. On this keychain, there is a key to the front door of our house, so that you can always return here anytime you want. Wherever you are and whatever you do, remember that you always have a home and people who love you no matter what happens. Molly looked at me and Jennifer. Remember that we love you always. And this keychain will also go perfectly with the key to the brand new Ford Mustang convertible, which is waiting for you at the Horn Ford dealership on Madison Boulevard. The sales manager, Harry, will be waiting for you there tomorrow morning. Tiny and Ollie will pick you up early to take you and show you around. Jennifer screamed loudly, and her face lit up like a lantern in pitch darkness. She had wanted a car since she was 16, but Molly and I didn't want to give her her own car that early. Even though we trusted her completely, we felt that at 16 years old, it was too much responsibility. Now that she's 18, we figured she was ready. I don't know what to say. You are the best, and I will not let you down. I promise. No fast driving, no fines, and I won't let anyone drive the car except you two, she babbled. What color is it? Is it manual or automatic? What? Molly interrupted her. Wow, you'll see everything for yourself tomorrow. Harry will let you choose the color. I think there was red, blue, and maybe a few other variations on the court. But we're glad you're happy. We think that now you can cope with this responsibility. Jennifer jumped up and started hugging and kissing us one by one. She was about to call Becky, her best friend, but I reminded her that we still had gifts. Unless, of course, you want to stop there, I joked. No way, she exclaimed. I waited until she calmed down a little and continued. And now a more practical gift. On the day you were born 18 years ago, I opened a brokerage account in your name. As my mother and I could, we replenished it, and the interest allowed the capital to grow. I paid the taxes myself, so everything in the account is clean and without any debts. Today, there is a little more than $200,000. This money is yours to pay for tuition at any university you choose. If you go to Miami, this will be enough for a master's degree. And if you spend your money wisely, you'll have enough left over to start your life after university. Jennifer looked, stunned, at me, then at Molly, and then back at me. She knew that we were willing to pay for her education, but had no idea that she would have such a reserve. She thought about student loans, but because of our income, she had little chance of getting them. And now, with this gift, she could control her future career. This was very important for her, to show us that she was ready for independent life and responsibility. With tears of joy and disbelief in her eyes, she said quietly, I can't believe that someone can be as lucky with their parents as I am. I hope I can justify your pride. Molly was the first to speak. We were always proud of you and could always trust you, no matter what happened. If this were not so, we would not have decided to give you such gifts to support you in admission. We will miss you terribly, but we understand that the time is coming to let you go. Jennifer looked at me. I'm so glad you were always there. I remember how you taught me to ride a bike, play basketball, then drive in your old truck, and how he refused to let me even ride a motorcycle, even when Uncle Tiny or Uncle Ollie or any of my other uncles came on their bikes. She smiled. They always said that I was all about you when I tried to get on their motorcycles and persuaded me to take me for a ride. That's how I got the nickname TW from Training Wheels, remember? You have always been my rock, the one I cuddled up to when times get tough. I know that you will always be there when I need you. She sobbed. I apologize for being so sentimental, but it's true. While Jennifer spoke, I watched Molly out of the corner of my eye. She looked embarrassed, although she was smiling. She looked at me, but I turned away before she caught my eye. Molly just shook her head, collected herself, smiled at her daughter, and turned her attention back to her. Jennifer then turned to Molly. You always showed me the softer side of things and knew how to cheer me up during dark periods. When I was sad, you lifted me up. When I was on the rise, you reminded me how painfully you can fall if you become arrogant. I think I will need your advice more than once. With you and Dad, I always knew that I was loved and protected. Thank you. I love you both so much, she said, wiping away tears. I love the gifts you gave me and the love with which you gave them. I don't know what awaits me, But everything I achieve will be thanks to you too. Wherever I go, I will always carry you in my heart." She touched her chest with her hand. There were hugs and kisses again. It was wonderful. It took us a little time to calm down and wipe away the tears that each of us tried to hide. Finally, everyone became quiet again. Molly looked at me. "I think you said that you have 2 more surprises." Smiling, she turned to Jennifer. "Your dad didn't tell me anything, so tell us what these surprises are." I got up and went to the work office. He took 2 thick 8x10 envelopes from the table and returned to the table. I sat back down, sighed heavily, and looked at the 2 most important women in my life. I loved one for 18 years with all my heart and soul. I loved the other one even longer. But the love for one of them could be destroyed, perhaps forever, and the other's love was now being tested. I looked at Jennifer. "I know that you are supposed to receive the information that is in this first envelope. Now that you are an adult, you have the right to know her. There may be a softer way to do this, but I'm afraid it would only complicate things. I had hoped to present this in a more appropriate setting, but your mother insisted that now was the best time." I turned to Molly. "Your actions last Monday finally convinced me that this was the right thing to do." The smile instantly disappeared from Molly's face, and she turned pale. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but she couldn't say a word. She raised her hand as if to touch me, but then lowered it. She just sat there, stunned and speechless. I pushed the envelope towards Jennifer. "Here is all the information about your biological father, a certain Ronald Davis," I said. "Inside there are all the medical documents you would need for any medical application, as well as his home address and phone number. It also lists the phone number for the motel here in Cleveland where he is currently staying. He knows that you are his biological daughter, but we met 8 months after you were born. At my request, he signed a waiver of parental rights, as well as consent to your adoption. I officially adopted you 6 months after that, and you were legally my daughter for all of those years, except for the first 14 months of your life. He also agreed not to contact you or see you until you reach adulthood. This condition just came into force today. In addition, I insisted that he leave town and have no further contact with your mother." I turned to Molly. "Although you didn't know it, you signed my adoption papers during one of those signature parties we held when I was expanding the business. You didn't understand what you were signing, and I didn't tell you." Molly continued to sit with her head down and her eyes closed. Her shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. Looking at how much pain she was in, I could hardly restrain the desire to come up and hug her and tell her that everything would be fine. But I remembered last Monday and turned away. Jennifer sat as if struck by thunder. She looked first at me and then at Molly with such eyes as if she was seeing us for the first time. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she finally stared at her mother, who had been silent all this time. "Mom, what is he talking about? Who is Ron Davis, and why is he my biological father? What have you done? How could you do this to me?" She slammed her small fist on the table, turned to me and screamed, "Tell me what she did. Where were you, and why did you let this happen? If he is my biological father, why did this happen?" I answered very calmly, but with emphasis. "You are my daughter. You have always been my daughter. I am not the one who provided the DNA, but I gave you all the love I could from the day you were born, and I will love you until the day I die." I took her hands in mine. "Never, not for a second, doubt. This paper will not change a single drop of what has happened between us over the past 18 years. I love you with all my heart, and you are my daughter, now and forever. As for the question, why didn't I stop this? I just didn't know until it happened. If I had known, I would never have allowed this to happen, knowing what it meant for you and for our family. I can't speak for your mother, but I'm sure she didn't mean to hurt you. And when you were born and I saw you in Molly's arms, I realized that I could never leave you. I did everything I could to keep you with me." She smiled faintly. "I don't care what is written in these papers or what anyone might say. You are my dad, period." Then she looked at her mother again. "Do you have anything to tell me?" Molly raised her eyes and looked at Jennifer in a dead voice. Nothing that could improve my reputation in your eyes." After these words, she stood up and left the room, slowly walking up the stairs to the bedroom. We heard the door close, and there was silence. I looked at Jennifer. "I want you to remember something very important. Molly is your mother and has always loved you unconditionally. She has been there for you and for us all these years. She never once gave you a reason to hate her or disrespect her. What happened was between her and me, and she had to live with it for 18 years. But this has nothing to do with you. This does not cancel her love for you and does not cancel our love for you as a daughter." Jennifer nodded with tears in her eyes, saying that she understood everything and could not hate her mother, no matter how wrong she was. I said that it couldn't be any other way. I paused, overcoming the pain, and continued. "I know she will need your love in the coming months, and I hope you will be there. I may not be able to be with her." With these words, I handed Jennifer a business card with a phone number. "This is the number of my new house. You already have a cell phone. I moved almost all my things there. I'm leaving your mother, at least for a while. I can't stay here after what she did on Monday. If you need to contact me, call me. I'm not giving you my address because I don't want your mom to ask you for it. If you give her the number, I'll survive." Jennifer looked shocked. "But why now?" she asked. "This happened 18 years ago, and you and your mother seemed happy. We were a wonderful family. The reason is not only that I turned 18. I replied that I had always been in touch through the detective agency and had known where Ron Davis was since I first learned of his relationship with Molly. After our meeting, I convinced him to leave for another state. I asked a couple of uncles to talk to him so that he would leave. You know how persuasive they are, right? He had lived in Michigan for 18 years with his wife and 3 children, but for some reason he came to Cleveland 2 weeks ago. I know he called Molly twice and then made an appointment with her on Monday at the Holiday Inn near the highway. She went to this meeting, and they spent more than 2 hours there together. That's when I decided it was all over between us. If she can date him again after 18 years, then she is still not over him, and there is no future for our marriage. I'm not going to share her with another man, even if he's your biological father. I handed her the second envelope. "Please give this to your mother when she comes down. These are divorce papers. I will officially take them to court on Monday." After these words, I stood up and, through the tears that blurred my eyes, kissed my daughter and left my home to try to understand where to move in life now. Molly sat in the darkened bedroom she and Jim had shared for the past 20 years. She was almost in a stupor. She knew that day would come someday, but she hoped it wouldn't be until she was old and gray, so confident in her marriage to Jim that she wouldn't care if the truth came out. But she did not suspect that Jim had known about everything for a long time, about the affair, about the fact that he was not Jennifer's biological father, and even about her last meeting with Ron. How did he know? When exactly and for how long did you carry this knowledge within yourself? And why didn't you say anything before, at least to her? These questions haunted her as she thought back to the very beginning, to the moment when she made a fatal mistake, because of which both her marriage and her relationship with her daughter were now in jeopardy. Molly graduated from Massillon, Ohio, with good grades, but no plans to attend college. She had no money, and her mother could not help much. Molly's father died when she was 12, and her mother raised her alone. After leaving school, Molly worked in a store for a year, and the following year she attended a local technical college to earn a nursing degree. She studied hard, topped her class, and graduated from college at age 21, then got a job at a clinic in Cleveland. Over the next 2 years, she had the opportunity to work in different departments. She didn't complain about the rotation, jumped at any opportunity to gain experience, and eventually settled in the surgical department, where she found it interesting and sometimes even exciting. She did her best at work, didn't miss a day, continued to study and ask more experienced colleagues, trying to become even better. Over time, she earned her RN registered nurse license, was assigned additional duties, and gained the respect of senior staff. When she turned 25, she was appointed head nurse of the day shift in the surgical department. She continued to do an excellent job, and the doctors and nurses appreciated her work and responsibility. Molly was a dazzlingly beautiful girl, but during these years she had almost no time for her personal life and dating. She occasionally went on dates with male nursing colleagues or young interns, but this did not become something permanent, and on rare occasions it led to intimate relationships. She immediately made it clear that she was not going to jump into bed just to please her next boyfriend. Most romances ended quickly, and this suited her because the main thing for her was work. One of the responsibilities she was given, in addition to nursing work, was purchasing disposable medical instruments and trays for operating room nurses and doctors. That's how she met Ron Davis. He owned Davis Medical Supplies, one of many suppliers serving the hospital. Ron would show up on her floor every 6-8 weeks to replenish supplies. Ron was an attractive man, about 180 centimeters tall, with a good figure and short red hair. He was married and had 3 little daughters. Ron's wife is a pretty blonde, about Molly's age. Ron himself was at least 5 years older than Molly, very suave and self-confident. He constantly flirts with Molly and the other nurses, often making suggestive remarks that make Molly blush. But to tell the truth, she liked it, and she liked Ron too. His married status gave everything a slight hint of danger, but at the same time served as a guarantee that things would not go further. At least that's what she thought then. Ron had directly hinted more than once that he would like to meet Molly after work when he was in the operating room. She once jokingly said that they would probably have to make do with a storage room because she didn't have any time after her shift. She didn't think much of it, since Ron was leaving later that day for Chicago. During his next visit, Molly was working in the storage room, taking inventory of the very devices she needed to order from him. She didn't hear Ron come in and quietly lock the door behind him. The first thing she felt was his presence when he said her name. Before she could turn around, he grabbed her around the waist and leaned down to kiss her. She looked Ron in the eye and whispered, "We shouldn't do this. You are married. What about your wife?" Ron, without taking his eyes off this beautiful woman, replied, "We have this moment, and we have each other. You and I want the same thing, which means there is nothing wrong with our actions. I want you." With these words, they gave themselves up to this temptation. It was incredible. I never thought it could be this good. We definitely need to repeat it, but in a more comfortable environment. Then he looked at me and asked with concern, "Are you okay?" I laughed and replied, "It's okay, I'm just in shock." You're right, it was amazing. I reached for my clothes. Quickly getting dressed and trying to get myself in order, I unlocked the door and looked out into the hallway to make sure no one was there. I told Ron to leave and come back in an hour and a half, when I had time to finish taking inventory and prepare a list of orders for him. And she added, "Before you continue, I'll say right away, I'll see you next time you come to pick up your order, not before. It was fun, but I don't want it to become a habit or for me to become your mistress. Everything will be my way or not at all. Agree?" Ron agreed reluctantly, but knew he had to be happy with what he got. We broke up and didn't see each other for almost 6 weeks. When I did see him the next time, we agreed to meet the next day after work at the motel. In the evening, we indulged in passion there, and it turned out to be even better than the last time. This went on for a little over 2 years. We met either in the storage room or in the motel after my shift, had great sex, and parted ways without any obligations and without unnecessary contact until next time. It was convenient and wonderful. I didn't need to look for a partner, since Ron satisfied all my desires, and at the same time I did not have any serious responsibilities. The rest of the time I was left to my own devices. That's when I met Jim Morrison. I was already 29, I had achieved great success, becoming a head nurse and leader of the surgical nursing staff. Usually I didn't work as a nurse myself very often, but sometimes I replaced one of the employees when there weren't enough people or when I myself wanted to keep in shape. At that time, I was on surgery duty, replacing a nurse who had an emergency in the family. I was in the recovery room when I first saw him. As far as I know, he was riding a motorcycle. and some car flew out of a secondary street right in front of him. He tried to move to the side and avoided a head-on collision, but the motorcycle skidded and Jim was thrown out. He crashed into a tree, breaking his collarbone, his right arm, and several ribs. Doctors collected him in pieces and put him in intensive care. I was there when he woke up. The first thing he said when he regained consciousness was, "I must be dead. Are all the angels in heaven as beautiful as you?" At the same time, he was absolutely serious, and the expression on his face was priceless. I then fell in love with him instantly and completely. Jim. Jim Morrison was 17 when his father gave him his first motorcycle, despite his mother's protests. His father, Henry, was a fairly successful sales representative at a local dye and mold plant in Cleveland. Henry grew up an avid motorcyclist and loved bikes. He reluctantly gave up his motorcycle after marrying Teresa, Jim's mother. Teresa tolerated her husband's passion for motorcycles until she became pregnant with Jim. Then she said that she was not going to raise the child alone if Henry crashed somewhere with his biker friends on the next trip. She insisted that he give up motorcycles, and Henry reluctantly agreed, putting his bike in the garage. When Jim was 1 year old, his father finally sold the motorcycle and devoted himself entirely to the role of husband and father. Although he missed that freedom, he loved his family more. They were not rich, but they lived very comfortably. A well-kept three-room house on the southern outskirts of Cleveland. Jim was a bright guy, but he had no desire to go to college and did not show much success in sports. He spent most of his free time at Donovan Cycles, a small shop owned by Fred Donovan, an old friend of Henry's. Fred put up with Jim and even began to gradually teach him how to repair various motorcycles that were brought in for service. Jim loved motorcycles, communicated with bikers, and they reciprocated his feelings. He turned out to be a born mechanic, able to quickly find and fix any breakdown. Bikers began to recommend it to each other and brought new clients. The service gradually expanded, to Fred's delight. He hired 2 more mechanics. After receiving a new bike, Jim rode with other motorcycle club members after school, meeting more bikers and helping them with repairs. Gradually, he became so good that several clubs made him an honorary member and tried to lure him away for good. But Jim laughed it off and didn't want to offend anyone. Until he graduated from high school and was 18 years old, he continued to travel and work part-time for Donovan. At 18, he became an adult, although he still lived with his parents. Around this time, Fred Donovan approached Henry and asked if he could hire Jim full-time to repair motorcycles and help with sales and service. Henry was only glad. He knew that Jim was not interested in college, and working for Donovan would give him a good income. Teresa also agreed because Jim was a reliable guy who didn't get into trouble, and she trusted him. If he likes this job so much, why object? It was important to her that her son be happy. That is why she did not strictly interfere when Henry decided to give him a bike for his 17th birthday. Yes, she protested, but not too actively. She saw in Jim's eyes the same passion for motorcycles that his father once had. She was still a little sad that Henry had given up the bike for the sake of his family, but she had no regrets. After all, Henry had become an exemplary husband and father. Over the next year, Jim worked for Donovan, and at age 19, Fred suggested that he try to take over the workshop, manage it while simultaneously training 2 new employees in charge of service. Jim agreed. This would give him more time to observe new recruits, and it could also help with sales. Jim also had a natural talent for persuading clients, perhaps because he himself was passionate about motorcycles and had a great understanding of them. Over the next 3 years, Jim sold more motorcycles than Fred had managed to sell in the previous 5. When Jim turned 21, Fred began to appear in the store less and less, and Jim actually took over the management of the business. He did the bookkeeping, ordered new products, processed transactions, trained employees, and kept the store running at a high level of efficiency and profitability. He did this much more successfully than Fred had done before, and the company's financial performance only grew. Everything was going great. Over the next year, the situation did not change, and Jim did not complain. He liked what he did. He was happy, he was helpful, he made minor changes that he thought Fred would approve of, and he improved further. One day, while he was preparing a brand new motorcycle for a customer, Fred walked into the store looking like he had hit the jackpot. He called Jim over and said, "We need to talk. Can you ask Juan to replace you for a couple of hours?" "Of course, boss," Jim replied. "Can't we talk right here?" "No," Fred waved him off. "Call Juan and let's go." They went into the office, where Fred was sitting at his desk, and he ordered everything to be put aside. After that, they walked out and got into Fred's Hummer. "Where are we going?" asked Jim. "You'll find out now," Fred answered. Fred parked at the Wachovia Bank, where the company's accounts were kept. Inside, he walked up to the girl at the information desk and said, "Tell Barry Woods that Fred and Jim are here. He's waiting for us." The girl smiled and let them go to Barry. Fred took Jim by the hand and led him into the office. "There are two men there, one at the table, the other on the side. This is Barry Woods, the bank's loan officer, and this is his boss, Herman Yates. Gentlemen, this is Jim Morrison, whom I told you about. We discussed the possibility of you buying my business," Fred continued, "and came up with a plan that I think you'll be interested in." All three of them stared at Jim, waiting for his reaction. He was in shock, and apparently it was clear on his face, because Mr. Yates came up, sat him down on a chair and said, "Boy, you better sit down, otherwise you'll fall." And so began a long conversation that lasted about an hour. It turned out that Fred had decided to retire and move to Florida to live with his brother and his wife. He had been closely watching Jim for the past 3 years, and was confident that Jim would be the best person to continue the business. This was confirmed by the company's financial indicators. All loans were repaid, the business had been steadily showing profits for 2 years, and it was enough to cover any bank loan. Moreover, the price that Fred asked for the store was almost ridiculous, and the remaining capital of the company would more than compensate for any initial payment. Jim, dumbfounded, asked why it was so cheap, and Fred replied that he had already saved enough for a comfortable retirement and did not want or need anything more. Moreover, he treated Jim like a son and saw this gesture as his gift to him. Since Jim's father died 3 years ago, followed shortly after by his mother, Fred has practically become family to him. Jim couldn't speak from shock. He was given time to think it over. As a result, the agreement was concluded, all documents were signed, and Jim became the owner of Donovan's workshop. That's how it all happened. Over the next 2 years, Jim continued to make changes and improvements, and profits continued to grow. He hired some of his biker friends to work in the store to help with growing sales. He also brought in two bikers, Tiny and Ali Tajani, whom everyone called Tiny, to serve as special assistants. Tiny, actually Jose Ramirez, was 6'4" tall, Hispanic, and could scare anyone just by looking at him. Ali, whose full name was Alular Muhammad, was an African-American man who stood 5 feet 10 inches tall and was as strong as an ox. They were inseparable friends and old pals of Jim. As special assistants, they handled everything: unloading, deliveries, preparing new motorcycles, and any other task that Jim assigned them. They were like brothers to him, and he trusted them unconditionally. Later, Jim repeatedly thanked fate that they were the ones with him. Business continued to thrive and life seemed great. During this period, Jim met Tony Alexander, a high school friend who went to college, earned a degree in accounting, and returned to work for a local manufacturing company. Tony liked motorcycles and often visited Jim in the evenings and on weekends. Finally, he bought himself a small bike, and Jim helped him get used to it and pass his license. Tony was delighted. Jim sometimes jokingly suggested that he quit his job and join him, but Tony refused, saying that he could not afford it. Nevertheless, Jim continued to cast the bait over and over again. About a year later, Jim decided to open a second store on the west side of Cleveland. He needed a manager and someone who would handle sales and service. He talked to two biker friends who seemed capable of fitting into the 9 o'clock, 17 o'clock schedule, and they agreed to his terms. Together, they looked for a space, equipped it, and 8 months later, they opened a new store called Morrison Cycles. It turned out to be a successful start, and within a year the store was profitable. Everything was going great. One day, Tony walked into a new store when Jim was there and asked him to talk. Tony looked worried, and Jim took him to the office, sat him down, and gave him a bottle of beer. Tony said, "I just got fired, and I don't know what to do now. I really need a job, but I don't want to do the same thing again. Maybe I should join you." "What do you suggest?" asked Jim. "I think I can take out a loan and invest in your business. Help you manage your affairs, do accounting, taxes, properly manage inventory, and everything else. I'm sure I can save you a lot of money." Jim thought for a moment, and Tony continued, "And I could organize a corporation. If you plan to continue expanding, it is better to play it safe and not do everything alone." Jim replied, "That all sounds great. Are you sure you can arrange everything as it should?" "Absolutely," Tony said. "So, do we have an agreement?" "Consider it yes," Jim smiled. Thus Morrison Enterprises was born. Tony invested in the business, receiving a 20% share. It turned out to be one of Jim's most successful investments. Tony registered Morrison Enterprises as an LLC. Over the next 4 years, they opened 4 more stores in Michigan, Indiana, and Kentucky, bringing the total to 6. Profits tripled, there were almost no debts, and many of Jim's former fellow bikers were hired into the stores, who worked great and attracted more and more clients thanks to recommendations. Life was wonderful. As the business grew, Jim began to allow himself more and more vacations, leaving Tony, Tiny, and Ollie to manage things. Tony liked to lead, and he did it brilliantly. Jim had much more money than he had time to spend. He invested most of it in various projects, but at the same time bought himself a huge house, where his biker friends and their girls constantly came and hung out there for a day or two. He also acquired a couple of sports cars, which he had long dreamed of, although his favorite vehicle remained his Harley. At 30, life was truly carefree. That is why on that ill-fated day when the accident happened, he drove around freely without much business or concern. He was calmly riding his motorcycle, not worrying about anything, when suddenly a car jumped out of a side street at a red light. Seeing her, Jim sharply steered the bike to the right to avoid a head-on collision, but the motorcycle skidded onto the curb and Jim flew over the handlebars. He later learned that he had broken 4 ribs, a collarbone, and 4 fractures to his right arm. He did not remember this moment because he lost consciousness upon impact. He came to his senses already in the recovery room, saw a beautiful creature in front of him, and decided that he had died and gone to heaven. "Are all angels as beautiful as you?" he asked. And then he fainted again. That's how we met. Molly. During Jim's rehabilitation, we spent hours talking and getting to know each other. I noticed that his friends were very unusual, large, tattooed, dressed in jeans and leather. Jim called them brothers. I jokingly asked one of them why Jim had so many brothers, and he laughed and said that Jim's family was really huge and a little strange. But they say I should take good care of Jim. After all, he is in the picture, and for many people he is very important. And at the end, he added seriously that if I take care of him, then they will take care of me too. Later, I realized what he meant. When my shift was over, I would often stay at the hospital just to be with him and spend time with him. While he was recovering, we planned what we would do when he was discharged. One day, about 3 weeks after Jim was first admitted to the hospital, I met Ron in the same storage room where we first had sex. Everything was the same. Oddly enough, I wasn't even thinking about Jim at that moment, but I still told Ron that I couldn't meet him the next night at the motel, as we usually did, because I had other plans. I didn't think about my feelings for Jim or Ron then. It was as if these were 2 different worlds. I loved Jim, and I just lusted after Ron. Aren't these different things? Therefore, I was quite surprised that, when I came to Jim's room in the afternoon, I suddenly could not look him in the eyes. I lied about it being just a bad day at work, and he seemed to believe it. I finally managed to shake myself up and start enjoying my time with him again. But I was tormented by a feeling of guilt. During this same period, I learned that Jim is the owner and CEO of his own company, Morrison Enterprises, a chain of motorcycle sales and service stores in 4 states. He gave me the address of one of the stores not far from my house, and I stopped there one day on the road to check it out. And it's true. The manager, hearing me ask about Jim Morrison, showed me a brochure with his photo. He knew that Jim was in the hospital and asked me about his condition and when Jim would return. It was obvious that they knew each other well and were very worried about him. When Jim was discharged, we started dating. It was truly love at first sight on both sides. I already understood then that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with this man, and I was sure that he felt the same. We dated for about 3 months before Jim took his first tentative steps toward intimacy. He was quite conservative in this regard, and that suited me. I let him know that I felt the same way, and we agreed to spend the weekend together at Jim's house. On Friday of that week, Jim picked me up after work and brought me to his place. The house was what we needed, two-story brick mansion in one of the best areas of Shaker Heights. There are probably 20 rooms there, and the area is over 550 square meters, about 6,000 square feet. I was amazed. When I asked why he needed such a huge home, he reminded me of his big family. He said that often 10, 12 people live with him at the same time. But this weekend, he noted, is special, and there will be no other guests. He gave me a tour of the top floor and garage. As I expected, there were about 24 motorcycles. Actually, there were about 10 of them, as well as 2 sports cars, which probably cost a lot of money. Jim admitted that he rarely uses them and prefers his Ford Explorer. That's what he mainly drives. The owner's bedroom was like another reality. There was a huge double bed with a water mattress, and the bathroom occupied more than 90 square meters, with a shower almost the size of my apartment. I told Jim that we simply had to try this shower together. He was embarrassed and replied that he was also looking forward to it. The weekend turned out to be wonderful. Our first intimacy was special. Jim treated me so tenderly, he wanted everything to go perfectly. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," he said. He smiled. "Glad you liked it." I smiled back. It was great. It was something incredible, true love. I realized how making love is different from just sex. With Ron, that's exactly what we had. And with Jim, we made love, and I loved it. I woke up to him watching me and smiling. "You know, I love you," he said. "And I have been you ever since I first saw you in the hospital." "It's good that you finally caught up with me," I answered with love. We made love many more times that weekend, and each time was better than the last. We understood that we wanted to spend our whole lives together. That same weekend, we swore our love to each other and started talking about the future. We really became one couple. The next week, I returned to work. Jim was released from the hospital, and now I was missing something on my work days. For the first time in many years, I felt bored at work. I understood that I missed him and that I needed to learn to enjoy my evenings and weekends. In the meantime, I decided to work harder to make time go faster. We lived like this for several more months. Jim and I were in no rush to plan our wedding since he hadn't formally proposed. I said that until he asks, as expected, I will not give consent. He promised to arrange everything as it should. All that was left was to wait. During this period, Ron stopped by the hospital twice to replenish our supplies, and both times tried to hint at renewing our connection. Every time I repeated that Jim and I were in love, I would not cheat on him. Ron insisted that it was he who was deceiving his wife, but I was not married, which means I was not cheating on anyone. I did not agree with his logic, and tension hung between us. This continued until about 4 months into my relationship with Jim, when he had to leave for 2 weeks to visit stores in other states. I missed him for 10 days, and then Ron showed up again. As usual, he winked at me playfully and suggested we meet after work for a drink. This time, when Jim was away and I was in a state of wild hunting, I agreed. We had drinks at his motel restaurant and ended up in his room. The only difference, I couldn't get the same pleasure because this time I experienced a strong feeling of guilt that wouldn't let me go. I made it clear to Ron that he wouldn't get anything more from me this time. He got angry and accused me of teasing him. but he didn't press further. I went home and called Jim. Hearing his voice, I felt better. He said that he was taking a ticket for the next flight and would be back in about 2 hours. I couldn't wait for him to arrive. Then I decided that since Jim didn't know anything about my connection with Ron before we met, then there was no need for him to know about it now so he wouldn't suffer. The feeling of guilt, of course, did not disappear anywhere, but at least I had a strategy. Jim came home that evening and proposed to me. He brought flowers, took me to a wonderful restaurant for a romantic dinner, and asked me to marry him over dessert and coffee. I agreed, and 6 weeks later we got married. I became Mrs. James L. Morrison wife and lover. We were truly happy with Jim. I continued to work at the hospital because I really loved my profession, and Jim was completely occupied with his business. This way we could spend time together, appreciating these moments even more. The anticipation made them even more desirable. Gradually, I learned more and more about Jim's work and his brothers. I met many of them. They were members of various motorcycle clubs. They all seemed a little scary to me, but as I got to know them better, I, like Jim, came to respect and warm up to them. It was obvious that in all these clubs Jim was considered an honorary member, and they were ready to do anything for him. Because he, in turn, always helped if someone needed support, repaired motorcycles on credit, provided accommodation for the night. He treated them like family. And since I am his wife, they accepted me unconditionally. It was nice to feel such powerful support. Jim. At 30, I had almost everything I had ever dreamed of, except someone to share it with. Before meeting Molly, of course, I had relationships with girls. Some I met on business, some were introduced by friends, some were just casual acquaintances at a bar. But none of them captivated me for long, and I changed girls like I changed motorcycles. Yes, I liked them, but I always knew that behind the next door there would be something new. Sex was okay, but not something I personally craved all the time. Maybe I'm weird, but I didn't think that without sex I was missing out on anything special. More often it happened according to the protocol. We had a good walk, drank, and then there were violent kisses, and sometimes it seemed that after dinner and a movie it was supposed to have sex. I never had any special feelings after all this. I didn't want to continue. I didn't mind skipping the bed part altogether if it didn't add anything extra. As Molly and I began to grow closer, I became increasingly angry at any circumstances that separated me from her, and I eagerly awaited her arrival in the hospital room. As long as she was near, I felt no pain. When she was not there, he became an intolerable patient. One day she herself asked if I would like her to drop by to see me after her shift. I happily agreed, and soon she actually began to come every evening. Not only did I recover much faster, but my entire mood changed in her presence. I told her about myself and my love for motorcycles, and that I owned and ran my own company. For the first time, I felt proud while saying these words. Previously, for me, it was just a business and a way to make money, but now in Molly's eyes, it looked more meaningful. True, she reacted to the information quite calmly, and I was a little sad. I thought that she would be impressed. She probably won't be surprised that easily. I gave her the address of one of my stores near the hospital. Nothing special. The next day I found out that she went there herself because she didn't fully believe me. When she returned to me that evening, she said that she had spoken to Ramon at the store I mentioned, and he gave me his best wishes. Apparently, now that she was convinced that everything was true, the impression was stronger. During my recovery, Molly also met several of my brothers, people from various motorcycle clubs with whom I had developed friendships over the years. These were the most loyal friends you could imagine. Tiny and Ollie visited me daily, found out what I needed, assured me that they would sort things out in my absence, and generally showed complete willingness to help. They asked if they needed to take care of the guy who drove out onto the road in front of me, but I told them not to touch him. They also took Molly under their wing and told her that if she suddenly had any problems, she should contact them immediately. Molly is now one of her own and has nothing to worry about anymore. They said this without joking, and she understood it. At first, she was a little afraid of such large and brutal types, but after talking with them, she gained trust and sympathy. They nicknamed her Little Mommy, and this amused her terribly. Molly was almost always cheerful. If her work was depressing, she knew how to hide it. In all my time in the hospital, only once did she seem upset about something. It was during one of her shifts. She came into my room towards the end of the working day, sat down next to me on the bed, averted her eyes, and was silent. I asked what was the matter. She said there were a couple of things that made her sad. But she soon moved away, returned to her normal state, and did not mention it again. Accordingly, I also did not insist. We planned that when I finished therapy in about 3 weeks, we would immediately start seeing each other more often. Our dates became more and more the central event of my days. I wanted to spend as much time with her as possible. We talked about weddings, children, life together, and everything that lovers talk about. Molly refused to give any firm consent to the marriage until I really asked her. She said that I needed to do everything properly, otherwise it was not serious. I nodded and said that I would definitely propose at the right time. We ended up sleeping together one weekend at my house. I finally decided to invite her to step further and take the relationship to a sexual plane. I worried for a long time because I believed that having met that woman, I should make our first intimacy special. I didn't know exactly how it should be different, but I was sure that everything would not be the same. My joy was to make her happy, and I really wanted to know if I could handle it. The sex turned out to be truly magical. I've never had anything like it before. Molly and I didn't sleep, but made love, and it was incredible. I realized that it was with her that I wanted to live forever. Already that weekend, I began to think about how to propose to her, find a ring, and choose the right time and place. I was planning to ask for her hand in marriage the following weekend, but I received an unexpected call from Philip Toth, the manager of my store in Indianapolis, Indiana. He said that their sales manager left urgently due to family reasons, and they were already short of people. He asked me to come while he hired 2 new employees and trained them. I agreed and told Molly that I would be gone for about 2 weeks. I invited her to come with me, but she replied that she could not take a vacation right now. And so on Monday, I left. I ended up staying there for a little over 2 weeks. Molly called every day. We missed each other terribly because before we had not been apart for so long. Phil said he had everything under control now, so I could leave with a clear conscience in a day or two. I decided to fly out on Friday so I could be home in time for the day I was planning to propose. On Friday, I flew in, called Molly, surprised her with flowers and dinner at a restaurant, and proposed while we were already drinking coffee and eating dessert. She agreed, and we started planning a quick wedding. I wanted to make love that night, but Molly said she was too emotional and tired to really enjoy intimacy, so we just snuggled together and fell asleep in our arms. We got married 6 weeks later, and everything was great. Molly moved in with me and continued working. She loved what she was doing and had no reason to quit. I agreed because it made her happy, and in the evenings, she always shared interesting stories with me. We continued to grow as a couple, and Molly met almost all of my friends. They still came to visit, and Molly fit in perfectly with my company. I was happier than I've ever been in my life. Molly. Life with Jim was great. We both worked jobs we loved, but spent our weekends traveling, making love, and just enjoying each other's company. I delegated most of my responsibilities to other nurses and became more of a teacher than a supervisor. Because of this, my nurses became highly regarded by the doctors and interns because they were the best in the hospital. Many went on to higher positions, and we all remained close friends. I had great fun, and life got better and better. Jim opened 2 more stores and took on 2 new contracts with Honda and Kawasaki. This required additional training, and Jim organized courses for his mechanics. He himself, of course, also took these courses so as not to lose his qualifications and helped train new service mechanics. There was always enough money in our marriage, so we never had to decide whether to deny each other something we wanted. Fortunately, we didn't want anything more than ourselves. About a year after our wedding, Jim and I discussed the issue of children. We both wanted them and decided that we would start planning a family. We chose the date July 4th, which is about a month and a half from now, when I will stop taking the pills. We were both excited about the opportunity to become parents. Jim, it seems, even more than I was. I also wanted children, but he had an almost fanatical desire to become a father. I don't know why his father was always very good to him. He died several years ago, and Jim probably never fully got over it. He wanted to continue the work started by his father. I read that if you stop taking the pill, there is no guarantee of getting pregnant right away. Most books stated that it may take several months for the body to return to its normal cycle, and pregnancy may not occur for up to a year. So I decided to stop taking the pills now, so that when we really start trying, I would have time to spare. I left them that same day. I didn't tell Jim about this, but I was sure that he wouldn't mind even if I got pregnant right away. With the new branches opening, Jim went on a circuit tour of all of his stores with Tony and Tiny to make sure everything was ready for the launch of the new lines. He planned to return in more than 3 weeks and asked if I would mind being left alone. I assured that everything would be fine and that Ollie would be with me if I needed anything. He calmed down and flew away the next day. We called each other every day and everything was fine, but I myself developed a strong sexual desire as soon as I stopped taking the pills. I reminded him that when he returned, it would be time to have a baby. He muttered something about getting on the next plane, but I told him to slow down and come back ready for his dad duties. About 2 weeks after Jim left, I was in the utility room taking inventory of medical supplies. I decided to do this a day early so that when Ron came to get his order, I wouldn't run into him in the pantry. The thing is, I dated Ron twice after I met Jim, and both times I felt guilty and unhappy. After the second time, I finally decided that I would never cheat on my fiancée again. Even though it was too little too late, I made this promise to myself. I wasn't really concentrating on my work, thinking about Jim, when I suddenly felt someone's arm around my waist. I shuddered and leaned back, imagining that it was my beloved, and indulged in memories of the feelings that he gave me during our intimacy. I stopped thinking and allowed myself to fall into the illusion that it was Jim. Meanwhile, Ron was already acting. I suddenly realized that I was no longer taking pills. I was overcome with horror. I turned around and yelled at him to get out. He tried to calm me down, but I just pushed him away, cried and shouted, go away, my God, just leave me alone." He looked worried, but left. I immediately put my clothes in order and rushed to the toilet. I tried to clean up as best I could and prayed that nothing would happen. I felt so disgusted and scared that I couldn't even breathe normally. I finished my shift without seeing Ron again and ran home as soon as I could. There I stood in the shower for a long time, trying to wash away the sin of what I had just done. I prayed to God not to punish me and that everything would work out. Later, when Jim called, I didn't reveal my condition. He didn't suspect anything, and I felt a tiny bit of relief. However, it quickly disappeared, and I fell asleep in my robe, crying, and woke up feeling like I hadn't slept a minute. Throughout the day, I panicked and tried to negotiate with God so that everything would work out, so that Jim would never find out, and so that we could live in our happiness. I felt a little better when the phone rang. It was Jim. He said that he was already at the airport and would be home in an hour. I was so happy that I cried and asked him to hurry up. I believed that now everything would really be okay. When Jim returns with his love, he will seem to fix everything that happened. As soon as Jim entered the house, I literally attacked him with kisses and asked him to immediately take me to the bedroom. He did so, and we made love for the rest of the evening. He was surprised by such pressure, but I said that I accumulated all this during the separation. He did not suspect anything and gladly accepted my initiative. In my heart of hearts, I hoped that Jim would get pregnant so I wouldn't have to worry about what happened to Ron. And I prayed again. Well, 6 weeks after I had sex with Ron and Jim on the same day, I got pregnant. I didn't know whose child it was, but I prayed with all my might. It wouldn't be possible to find out for sure right away, and I wasn't sure I even wanted to know. If the child is Jim's, then everything will be fine. and if not, I will be forced to hide it as long as possible. Maybe everything would go so that nothing would point to Ron, and Jim would never suspect anything. Despite everything, the pregnancy really made me happy. I was really looking forward to telling Jim. We both wanted this, and I understood how happy he would be. I could only hope that this child was his. Jim. After the wedding, life turned out to be even better than I had hoped. We both worked, spent all weekends together traveling, lying in bed, making love, going out to eat. The weekend was wonderful. The business continued to grow. We added Honda and Kawasaki to our lines and opened 2 more stores. It was necessary to hire new people and conduct training, so I had to travel a lot and sometimes spend the night away from home. The money became more and more, and it was enough for me. I opened several investment accounts for myself and Molly and hired a good accountant. It seems that he really was not bad, because his income only grew. After our first wedding anniversary, I asked Molly what she thought about children. I wanted children, but I didn't know for sure if she was ready. She adored babies, but we hadn't talked about it for a long time. Molly was delighted and said that she was ready to start at any moment. We chose July 4th as the date, when we both would have more free time and could safely dive into family planning, taking into account her cycle. In anticipation of this date, I planned a trip that I had been putting off for a long time and took Tony and Tiny with me. Molly couldn't go with me then, so I asked Ollie to look after her. I left on Monday, and we had been on the road for about 2 weeks when I realized I couldn't live without Molly anymore. Even though I called her twice a day, the separation seems unbearable. I rebooked my return ticket for the next flight, leaving Tony and Tiny to finish things off. They understood me without any problems. I flew home and called Molly straight from the airport. She sounded just as happy as I was to hear I was back. When I entered the house, Molly attacked me as if we had not seen each other for years. She kissed, hugged, cried with joy, and demanded that I immediately take her to the bedroom. She said that she really missed me this time, and she didn't know why. Things got even better when Molly said she was pregnant 6 weeks later. I asked, how could this be, since we were going to wait until July? She replied that she stopped taking the pills in advance, because usually the body needs time, but apparently, in her case, everything happened instantly, and I was so diligent. She was delighted, and so was I. Molly. During pregnancy, Jim was an exemplary father. He adored me and wanted to protect me from everything. He insisted that I quit in the 6th month, afraid that I might catch some kind of superinfection in the hospital. I was really tired, and I also had to carry this huge belly, so I finally agreed and left work. I spent the rest of my pregnancy at home, took care of myself, and no complications arose. We were happy and, without skimping, furnished one of the free rooms next to our bedroom as a nursery. Jim hired contractors, and they did everything to the highest standard. The walls were painted pink. We already knew that there would be a girl. A painting was done on one of the walls. All the furniture was also pink and white, and carpet was laid on the floor, which was easy to clean in case of spilled milk and other things. Overall, it turned out great. The lighting was built in, with diffused light around the perimeter of the ceiling, and it could be slightly dimmed. In addition, the master cut a door directly from our bedroom to the nursery, so that we could go to the baby without going into the corridor. This also gave access to the bathroom from the nursery, which turned out to be very convenient. The last weeks of pregnancy passed, and everything corresponded to the forecasts of my gynecologist. He said that the contractions would be short-lived and the birth would go quickly. I, in his opinion, had excellent hips. We waited. Finally, the day came when I called Jim and told him to come immediately. He came rushing in 15 minutes, and we went to the hospital. I called the doctor in advance, and he promised to meet us. When we arrived, contractions were already every 7 minutes. Everything was going fine, but then complications arose. The doctors fussed with me for about an hour before they were able to restore me and performed the necessary procedure. This meant that we would no longer have children. I was heartbroken, but also grateful that our baby girl was okay and healthy. Jim was going crazy with worry while I was being operated on. Finally, the doctors said that I was fine, and so was the baby, but I couldn't have any more children. It was a hard blow in many ways, but as always, Jim showed his character and came to me with a smile on his face. He sat down on the edge of the bed and kissed me tenderly. Quietly said, "You did it, girl. Our baby is so beautiful, she's all about you." Tears welled up in my eyes. These were exactly the words that I needed to hear right now, but the sadness did not let me go when I said that this was our only child. He simply said, "She alone is enough for us. We will give her all the warmth and love that we have." We cried together, hugged, and the world around us became brighter as we moved hand in hand. I stayed in the hospital for another week after the operation, and everything went without complications. Our girl, Jennifer, was healthy and strong. I spent most of the day with her, and her dad spent all the time he could. From that moment, we began our family life. When it was time to be discharged, one of the nurses who had previously worked with me in the surgical department came into my room. She and I were very close. We spent time together after work, and sometimes on weekends. Our close relationship faded when I started dating Jim, but we remained friends. I asked her for one favor. She said she would help if it was within reason. I said, "I need you to quietly check my daughter's blood type in the documents, and so no one would know, especially Jim." She looked at me strangely, but promised to find out. She said that she would come to me tomorrow with the results. I thanked her and began to rack my brains about what I would do if what I was so afraid of was confirmed. Eventually, I dozed off, although my sleep was restless. Then Jim came, and I forgot about all my fears, rejoicing in him and our daughter. The next day, Sally came back and handed me a piece of paper. "Is this it?" I asked. She nodded. I said I'll open it later. She asked what was going on, but I didn't tell her, but only promised to talk in the evening after her shift. She left. When she came out, I opened the paper and saw the result: blood type A+. My breath was taken away as if I had been punched in the stomach. I think I lost consciousness for a second. This was the same nightmare outcome. It means Jim is not the father. My blood type is O negative and Jim's blood type is AB negative. Jennifer couldn't have had an A+ from both of us. God, what to do? I burst into tears and couldn't stop for about 20 minutes when the nurse brought Jennifer in for her morning feeding. She asked what was wrong with me, and I replied that I probably had hormone surges after the operation. She said that since I have a child in my arms, I don't need anything else. The nurse helped me move into a chair, gave me a bottle, and left. I was left alone, holding my girl and thinking about what to do next. In the evening, when Sally came to see me again, I already knew exactly what to do. I admitted to her that I had an affair with Ron, whom she also knew, and that the child, judging by the blood type, was his. I explained that Ron and I had stopped everything a long time ago, and that the time I got pregnant was a mistake. He came a day earlier than I expected, and Jim had just left on a business trip. I said that, having realized what Ron was doing, I was already technically powerless. Everything happened too quickly. I begged Sally to keep everything a secret and asked her to change the baby's blood type to AB in the baby's chart. She said it was illegal, but I begged because it would save Jim from the terrible truth. And what will he do to Ron if he finds out? It's scary to think about. She finally agreed only because she understood how it would destroy Jim if it became known. And she added, "Imagine what he will do to Ron." I didn't even want to imagine. The next day I was discharged, and the three of us went home. I carefully pretended to forget about my fears. I loved Jim and Jennifer more than life itself and knew that if the truth came out, everything would be lost. I swore he'd never find out, and she devoted her life to making Jim and Jennifer the center of everything in the world and giving them maximum happiness. It was my only way to live with it any longer. Jennifer's birth was complicated, and we almost lost Molly. I didn't know how I would live without her. Fortunately, doctors were able to save her. I was so grateful that she was alive, and that we had a healthy daughter, that at that time I didn't even think about the fact that we wouldn't have any more children. Then, of course, the realization came, but then I just hugged my wife and looked at our baby. I told her that I love them both, and that one daughter is enough for us. She seemed to have perked up. A week later, Molly was discharged, and the three of us began to live together. We made plans for Jennifer's future. I opened an account for her on her birthday, and we were already sure that she would go to college and become the best at whatever she did. We were crazy about our daughter, and Molly was the perfect mom. She gave it her all, caring for both Jennifer and me. I was worried that Molly needed to recover from a difficult birth, but she took the initiative in everything, from cooking to taking care of the house, not forgetting about me sexually, even when she was still not allowed to, really. I said that this was not necessary, but she objected. It's absolutely necessary. Well, I didn't argue, I admit. It was very pleasant. Everything was going great until the day when Jennifer was about 6 months old. I took it upon myself to take her for a routine checkup at the hospital. Our pediatrician worked there and was my friend and part-time client. I took Jennifer to the children's room at the hospital to wait for an appointment. I knew the woman who was in charge there from the time Molly worked at the hospital. Then I decided to go to the nurse's room because I knew it had the best coffee in the whole building. I had about 20 minutes left before my appointment. I found a cup, poured myself a glass, and stood up, leaning against the counter by the coffee machine to enjoy my drink in peace. Two nurses were already sitting in the room, but they couldn't see me from where I was. I didn't go out to them, I just wanted to drink coffee. Then I heard one of them talking about a beautiful little girl. I pricked up my ears. What if they were talking about my Jennifer? As a proud father, I am pleased to hear compliments addressed to my daughter. "Hey, Peggy, have you seen Molly's daughter?" asked the first nurse. "Yeah, I saw it," answered the second one. "Such a cutie. She probably took after her dad. And you understand what kind of dad I'm talking about." Sally said, "You mean Ron, right? I didn't think anyone else knew. Molly asked me to check her blood type while she was here in recovery. It didn't match her husband's blood type, so she asked me to change the record they received." "And what did she say when you told her about it?" "She didn't really say anything, just that it was an accident, and that she wasn't going to tell her husband. He would most likely kill Ron if he found out. You know, he's a motorcyclist and knows all sorts of people who could do something like that. I heard he's such a sweetheart. I can't believe he would hurt her." "I don't think so either, but who knows?" I stopped breathing during this conversation. It seemed to me that my heart stopped and my legs gave way. I had to leave the break room as soon as possible, otherwise I would have thrown away my breakfast and the coffee I had just drunk. Truth be told, I barely made it to the toilet before I threw up everything in my stomach. I knelt on the urine-stained floor of the cubicle and vomited my guts. I wanted to just die on the spot and not have to deal with what I had just heard. The only thing that kept me from sticking my head in the toilet and drowning myself was my daughter. She was waiting for me, and I couldn't let her down. My daughter. Suddenly, I was no longer sure of anything. Who is the woman I'm married to? What the hell did she do to me, and what did she do to us? Who is this Ron, and why is he the father of my child? Is all this true? I needed to find out the truth as soon as possible, as soon as I could figure out how to do it. The first step was to find out if Jennifer was really mine. A strategy began to form in my head. I picked Jennifer up from the nursery and took her to her appointment with pediatrician John Simpson, who was a friend of mine. He made us feel welcome, and we chatted about professional topics while he examined Jennifer. Overall, he was pleased with her development and said that she was growing as expected, and perhaps even a little faster than normal. Smiling, he said, "Well, Dad, how is the family doing? I know you and Molly must be proud of this little bundle of joy." I just looked at him, wondering how to ask what was on my mind. "John, let me ask you a question. If I ask you for a favor related to medicine, can you treat it as medical confidentiality?" He looked at me with bewilderment and said, "Of course, if you want. I can't even say anything to Molly if you don't want me to." I nodded and paused. Finally, he said, I want you to do a test on me and Jennifer and determine if she is really my daughter. John looked completely dumbfounded. Why on earth did you doubt? I can't believe Molly is capable of cheating. She loves you and this child as much as anyone in the world. He shook his head and admitted that he didn't understand how it could come to my mind. You and Molly are a great couple, and everyone I know thinks you are the perfect family. I've known you for as long as you've been married, and I'm completely confused. John, just do it for me. If I'm wrong, we'll forget I even talked about it. Believe me, I will be the first to call myself an idiot. John stared at the wall and finally said, Okay, the fastest way to find out is to do a blood type test. Do you know your group? I replied, I have a group AB. Molly's is O. She said that she is called a universal donor. John said that was a good starting point because then Jennifer's blood factor could only be negative. At the very least, it will be possible to find out whether I can be her father, and if the result is in favor of this, then it will be possible to do a DNA test. This will be 100% accurate. I asked how quickly the blood results would be ready, and he said he would call me at home that evening. He took the samples and we left. Frankly, I drove home with a heavy feeling. I was angry, afraid, determined to find out the truth, and at the same time completely confused. I didn't know what I would say to Molly. I understood that I had to stay cool and calm. I can't let her guess that something is bothering me. I pulled myself together when I entered the house. Hey, you two. Why so long? Did everything go as perfectly as I expected? Sally was in the kitchen preparing lunch for us. I put Jennifer in the playpen and went into the kitchen. Everything is fine. John said he thinks Jen is developing as expected, maybe even a little faster than usual. He took a blood test as a precaution, but doesn't expect anything bad. I took a can of cola out of the refrigerator and said, maybe he'll call tonight about one new cycle he wants to try. If he calls, let me know. With these words, I went to our office and called Tiny. Tiny, it's me. I need to talk to you as soon as possible. Can you come over? Of course, boss. I'll be there in about an hour. I hung up and decided to take care of business in the garage for an hour until Tiny arrived. I had already forgotten about lunch until Molly called me to eat. I really didn't want to go and chat about trifles at the table. I walked into the kitchen and said, I had enough of a breakdown at the hospital today. I think I'll skip lunch if you don't mind. Probably caught a slight cold, nothing serious. John said to drink more water and everything should go away. He says I don't have a temperature. I was amazed at how easy it was to lie to the woman I love more than anything in the world. But I thought, it turns out she knows how to lie even better. Although, I reminded myself, I don't know for sure if that's true yet. But I didn't have much doubt. I knew that Sally was Molly's best friend, and what she said to the other nurse was most likely true. Molly had never before given me the slightest reason to think that she was cheating on me, but now I believe that the fact was that she was simply hiding it very well. And I'm a fool who didn't even suspect anything like that. When Tiny arrived, I took him into the office and told him everything as it was, without holding back a single detail. I told him everything that was tearing me apart from the inside. The person who was the only one left whom I could trust with my life and family. The person I thought I trusted unconditionally, and he betrayed me. This thought tore my soul. Tiny listened and did not interrupt until I finished the story. He surprised me by saying, we can't do anything until Dr. John calls. Even then, we may not have enough information. Boss, you need to be 100% sure before you do anything. He looked at me sadly and continued, you can't do anything about Molly, even if it turns out that it's true. If you suddenly have such thoughts, then you will have to deal with me. Understood? I would never hurt Molly, even if it was her fault. She is my life and my love. Okay? She's good. Maybe she slipped up once. We don't know. We need to get to the bottom of the truth, and I know where to start. I have a friend who is a private detective. He is an excellent specialist. It's reliable and will get the job done for me. Give me all the information you have on Molly, where she worked, when she quit, what kind of Ron he is, and other information. I already know Jennifer's birthday. I'll do this starting today. Let's at least try to find out everything we can about this Ron. When Tiny left, I felt relieved. At least he took matters into his own hands, and now I could put this whole story aside for a little while, at least until John called. I returned to the house, to my family. It turned out to be easier than I expected. I loved both of my girls, despite what I feared. Jennifer was my daughter, no matter the blood test results, and Molly was my wife, even if she cheated on me. I needed to know more, but I was not ready to leave my family and my life. John called around 6:30 in the evening. Molly talked to him for about 5 minutes, then asked if I wanted to talk to him about the new cycle. John must have said something appropriate, because Molly laughed and indicated that she was ending the conversation. I picked up the phone in the office. "Well, what do you say?" I asked, picking up the phone. "Are you interested in this new cycle?" I waited until I heard Molly hang up in the kitchen. When he heard a click, he continued. "Okay, now she's not eavesdropping. What's the outcome?" He said, "I'm afraid I have bad news for you, Jim. The baby has blood type A plus. You can't be her biological father." With these words, he crossed out everything I believed in. Molly. When we settled at home, I quickly pulled myself together and began to take full care of Jennifer and run the household. Jim wanted to hire someone to help, but I said I wanted to do everything myself. He offered to take 2 girls from the motorcycle dealership to help with cooking, cleaning, and laundry, but I refused and told him to do his work and I to do my own thing. Finally, he agreed, seeing that I was coping quite well. To be honest, the first week I almost died from fatigue, but then it became easier and I was able to build a daily routine. When I was busy, I hardly thought, and I didn't want to think. I was scared to think. Every time I allowed myself to think, I ended up crying. So I worked until I felt exhausted. This is how I lasted the first month, and then I had a more or less free schedule, but I wasn't particularly happy about this free time. One day, sitting in a rocking chair with Jennifer in my arms, I thought about Jim. After all, he had been without me for almost 3 months. Didn't say anything because of my surgery and pregnancy before. He abstained too long. Although I was not yet ready to return to a full-time life, I decided that I could please Jim in other ways that were pleasant for him. I decided to carry out my plan that very night. When Jim said he was going to bed, I said I would join him. We went upstairs and Jim got ready to shower. I waited until the water started making noise, quickly took off my pajamas, and followed him into the shower. He looked down at me and said, "I really love you, do you know that?" I just smiled. "I love you very much too, and I wanted you to remember that," I replied. He asked what I wanted. I replied that I had enough, and that I just wanted to please him until I was ready to make love as usual. When you want to repeat it, just say it. I have a few more ideas, so don't be shy. He looked so happy that it almost brought me to tears. I myself felt happy again for a short time until reality returned. Then everything went smoothly for several months. We were able to return to a normal marital relationship, and Jennifer continued to develop without problems. The three of us found our usual rhythm of life, and everything looked quite prosperous. I myself noticed that my painful thoughts entered my head less often, and I hoped that over time I would completely stop remembering them. Dreams. Everything was going well until Jennifer was 6 months old. I wasn't feeling well, so Jim himself took her to John, the pediatrician. John is his good friend, so I wasn't worried. I didn't think about it at all until Jim came back and said everything was fine, but John took the blood test. I panicked for a second, suddenly remembering that I had asked Sally to change the blood type on the record. But then I realized that Jim had never seen those results, so he had no idea what kind of group Jennifer had, and he's unlikely to check, so I calmed down. Moreover, when John called, I chatted with him, and everything seemed fine. He didn't say a suspicious word. Time passed and Jim showed no interest, so I slowly calmed down, deciding that everything was going as usual. But apparently I was wrong. Every day I felt more and more that Jim was becoming some kind of stranger. I didn't understand what was going on, but he didn't say anything, and I was afraid to ask. Jim. After Molly put Jennifer to bed, I called Tiny on his cell phone and told him the news about the blood test. He said, "Damn, I hoped that this would not be the case. But like I said, boss, until we figure this out properly, don't do anything." I said I had no intention of hurting Molly. He reminded me that I still had to wait for a more complete picture. It was clear that he truly loved Molly and Jennifer as family and treated me like a father whom he respected and protected. I assured him that I would not rush to conclusions, and he replied that he had already contacted a detective he knew to get started on the case. At the same time, I didn't have the slightest idea how I could now live with Molly, pretending that everything was still wonderful. She knows the truth, of course, but she doesn't respect me or our marriage enough to be honest and say it for once in her life. Why did she hide all this? Maybe she's still seeing that Ron. How long has she been cheating on me? Every time I left? Or maybe she met him at the end of her shift when she said she was late at work. I knew absolutely nothing about him, and she never once showed that she was unhappy with me or that she was not satisfied with our closeness. I wanted to break loose, go and tell her everything right now. I was ready to do this when I suddenly realized that I risked losing not only my wife, but also my daughter. What if Molly decides to leave and take Jennifer, and even enlists the help of her biological father? What if they won't even let me see her? It would have killed me, even if she was not my own daughter, but for those 6 months I loved her with all my heart. I couldn't accept it and decided then and there that I would do whatever it took to keep her in my life, even if I have to live a lie with Molly. In the following days, I tried to avoid intimacy with my wife and waited for Tiny or his detective to tell me something. It was easier because we didn't see each other much. I was at work late, and Molly was tired in the evening. And in the evening, I gave my full attention to Jennifer, giving her time to rest. Besides, we both no longer had enough strength to sleep. So a week passed unnoticed in agonizing anticipation. Finally, about a week after our first conversation, Tiny called and asked to meet at the workshop. I agreed and told Molly that I would be out for about an hour to take care of some work, but that I would be back by 9. She hardly seemed to notice my departure. When I arrived at the old salon, which I opened 7 years ago, Tiny was already waiting there, and with him a tall, dark-skinned man of almost the same impressive physique. Tiny introduced him as Woody Tree, a private detective. The first thing I said was, "Come on, this is a pseudonym." The big guy looked at me without a trace of a smile and said, "No." That's where I left off. "Okay, Mr. 3, what do you have?" Woody got down to business and gave me the full scope of information about Ron Davis. There were details of his personal life, information about his wife and children, where they live, how long they have been married, all possible personal details. Photos of everyone he mentioned and a complete dossier. He talked about Ron Davis's company and how Ron periodically supplied supplies to the hospital where Molly worked about once every 6 weeks, and he communicated directly with Molly. Woody chatted unobtrusively with several nurses, finding out who loved Molly and who didn't. He talked with those who were hostile to her and found out that almost everyone knew about her affair with Ron. He found out that their relationship lasted for more than 2 years, but in the last year, apparently, the relationship cooled. He also added that he was clarifying the exact dates, but in general terms, that's all. I asked if he had anything that could give me an advantage in talking to Ron. Woody just grinned and handed me a folder that contained the names, addresses, and phone numbers of 7 women with whom Ron was now having affairs. I asked how he obtained such information. He replied, "I'm giving you what you asked for because Tiny asked for help. I won't ask why you need it, so don't ask me how I get it, okay?" "Agreed," I replied. Then I asked him to continue monitoring Ron and immediately inform me if he suddenly tried to contact Molly. If not, no information is required. I added that Tiny would take care of the payment and money was not an issue. Woody just said he would charge his flat fee, period. but he agreed to continue working. I thanked him and he left. I also sat with Tiny. He suggested we go have a drink so I could cool down before returning home. I liked the idea, and the two of us got pretty drunk. I decided to call Molly and tell her I was spending the night right here in the office because I had too much to drink with a new client. She didn't answer the phone, so I just left a message on the answering machine. If she doesn't like that I didn't come, that's her problem, because I'm not cheating on her. I'm just conducting an investigation behind her back. This is completely different, right? Molly. Since Jim took Jennifer to the pediatrician, he has become somewhat gloomy and uncommunicative. I was worried, but he didn't say anything that would directly indicate suspicion. I wondered what was wrong with him, but he continued to remain silent. When he called and said he was staying at the store because he had drunk too much, I was worried. Jim rarely gets drunk. He usually drinks socially or when he's depressed or anxious, but then he switches to cola or lemonade because he knows that I don't like it when he's drunk around the kid. And here, I had no idea what was bothering him so much. For the 100th time I thought, shouldn't I tell him everything as it is? I already explained to Ron. That time when he took advantage of the situation almost without my consent, I was without pills. Then I posed the question harshly and said that it was all over between us and let him communicate with other nurses. We almost never crossed paths until I quit. He came to see me off, but we hardly spoke. He tried to approach me several times, but I moved away from him, and he realized that I did not want to talk. True, we did talk on the phone once, and I told him that the child was his. And she added that if he tries to contact Jim or somehow interfere in our lives, then I will tell everything to his wife. I explained that my marriage was the most important thing to me and that I had already made mistakes. I said I was praying to get through this and that I didn't need him anymore. Ron objected that since it was his child, he had the right to communicate and participate in her life. But I said in rage that this would not happen. We ended the conversation with my threat and his reluctant agreement. I hoped that this was all over. Months passed, and it seemed to me that Jim was becoming increasingly distant. I didn't understand why, and he was silent. With all my might, I tried to seduce him again, but he showed no desire. This scared me. The thought that he knew about everything was spinning in my head more and more often. Out of desperation, I suggested that he consider selling the business or retiring, but he said he didn't want to, because his job was what kept him going. I poured my lips displeased and said, I thought it was me who was holding you. He looked so strange, but still smiled and said that he really has the best family in the world and that he loves us. This strange look haunted me all evening, but then there were so many things to do around the house that I stopped thinking about it. I agonized over the information I had about Ron Davis. I didn't know what to do with her, but I knew that something needed to be done. I talked to Tiny and Ollie and continued to suffer. I think Molly knew something was bothering me, but I kept telling her about work, clients, and any other reasons I could think of. I lived for my daughter and still loved my wife, but now I realized that I could no longer trust or believe in her. This hole in my ego was such a huge emptiness that I tried to fill it with work and caring for my daughter. Molly continued to be a loving wife and tried to get me to open up, but I couldn't risk losing my daughter to some scandal. Something had to be changed. Finally, I came up with a plan that I believed would give me every advantage in dealing with this situation. I talked to a lawyer I worked with in business, and he said he could do whatever I asked. I asked him to hurry up and let me know when everything was ready. About a week later, I called Tiny and Ollie and asked them to meet at my workshop. Said I needed to talk to Mr. Davis, and I wanted to have a strong argument to convince him to do things my way. If my plan worked, I would no longer have to worry about Ron and my wife, and I would no longer have to worry about losing my daughter in the event of a divorce. I called Woody Tree and asked him to find out where Mr. Ron Davis would be at 1:30 this afternoon. He called me back 5 minutes later and gave me the address, saying that Davis would be there for most of the rest of the day. I wanted to ask how he managed it so quickly, but I remembered our previous conversation and simply thanked him. At that moment, Tiny and Ollie arrived, and I explained my plan to them. They liked him. At 1:30 p.m., I knocked on Mr. Davis's office door at his business. He didn't have a secretary, so I just walked in and asked the first person I met where to find him. I was taken in without hesitation. "Come in." I walked into a small, cramped office with no windows. Tiny and Ollie came in behind me, and the three of us seemed to take up the entire space. However, I didn't care, since I didn't intend to stay there any longer than necessary. Let me introduce myself. My name is Jim Morrison. I believe you know my wife, Molly Morrison, very well, I said in a calm tone. I want to talk to you and say something that I think needs to be said. I'd rather you just shut up while I'm talking. I looked at him and waited for an answer. He looked from me to Tiny and Ollie and back to me again, with a look of fear on his face. I liked it. After all, my height is 193 centimeters and my weight is just over 118 kilograms. And then there's Tiny and Ollie, who is a bull himself. We could scare anyone, especially if we don't smile. But I didn't smile. Finally, he looked at me and said, I don't understand what you need from me. I know your wife from the hospital. She cooperates with me in my work, and that's all. He hesitated a little and then decided to bluff. I want you and your friends to leave my office, or I will call the police. I turned to Tiny and Ollie. He wants the police. Why don't you convince him that this isn't a good idea? Here they both walked around the table where Ron Davis was sitting. Ollie put his heavy palm on his shoulder and pressed slightly. I saw Davis wince and fidget. Then Tiny put his hand on the other shoulder, and Mr. Davis immediately became quiet. He just sat there and sweated. He looked at me and said very quietly, I don't think we need the police. I smiled at him, sat down on the only chair in this office, and began. Here is the deal I want to offer you. You will sign these papers that I have with me, then your employee will notarize them, and we will almost be done with each other. The first is the relinquishment of parental rights to my daughter Jennifer. In case you didn't know, you are her biological father. This at the same time refutes your, we're just on business about my wife. The second document is permission for me to adopt Jennifer as my daughter. This, coupled with giving up your parental rights, will take you out of the game completely. This is important to me, and I insist on such conditions. In exchange, I will agree not to share the following information with your wife. With these words, I handed him a piece of paper with the results of the paternity test, which indicated that he was Jennifer's biological father, as well as Molly's name, her address, phone number, and a list of other women with whom he had connections. The list was handed to me by Woody. Ron Davis glanced at the list and immediately sank, completely admitting defeat. Please do what you want, just don't tell your wife. I have 3 daughters whom I love. I don't want to ruin their lives just because I screwed up. Please don't ruin my family. I looked at him with disgust. This is the nonsense that Molly cheated on me because of. The same bastard who is Jennifer's biological father. The same nonentity that I wanted to kill. But if I killed him, I probably wouldn't be able to be there for my daughter. He wasn't worth it. I continued. And here's the rest. First of all, you'll never see Molly again. Never. If you need to go to the hospital for work, send someone else. If you see her on the street, run like crazy. If she calls you, hang up. There will be no other way. I will have 24/7 surveillance on you. If you stumble even once, you're dead. Secondly, I would suggest selling your business and moving out of state. While you're in Ohio, I might have a reason to change my mind. And if I change my mind, you'll be sorry. 3 months should be enough to find a buyer and complete the deal. I understand that this seems harsh, but that's what I need. I turned to Tiny and Ollie. These 2 gentlemen will be contacting you over the next couple of months to make sure everything is going according to plan. Tiny and Ollie smiled and squeezed his shoulders, reminding Davis that they weren't going anywhere. Is it coming? Yes, I agree. Give me the papers, I'll call the notary. When he signed the papers, notarized them, and gave me the originals, I nodded to Tiny and Ollie to leave. I needed another moment alone with Mr. Davis. After they left, I asked Ron for details of their affair. He was ready to answer all questions. We talked for about 15 minutes, he told me, and I occasionally asked. Finally, I left the office. I didn't talk to him or see him again. All further contact with Ron Davis went through Tiny. At least I was sure that Molly would no longer meet or talk to him. And I knew that Jennifer now officially belonged to me according to documents because I had the consent of my biological father to my paternity, plus Molly's signature on the adoption papers, although she did not know what she was signing. I wasn't going to tell her. The next day, my lawyer filed all the documents. Now I had to decide what to do with my marriage. But at least I did it without the fear of losing my daughter. After all, I had the permission of my biological father and the reason for Molly's betrayal, which gave me a serious trump card in the event of a divorce. I could finally relax and think about the problem calmly without feeling terrified. Molly. Yesterday, Jim came home somehow calmer and was much more pleasant to talk to than in previous weeks. I asked him if everything was going well now, and he just smiled. You wouldn't believe it if I told you. Let's put it this way, I am now in control of my life again. I was very happy about the changes in him. For the first time in a while, I felt like we were going to be okay. I myself was very nervous, expecting the worst and fearing when the thunder would strike, but now it seemed that everything had been settled. I thanked God and continued to try to be a better wife and mother, so I tried to atone for my mistake and strengthen our marriage. Jim. I finally decided that I still loved Molly, and Ron Davis' story gave me the opportunity to move on with my life. I just couldn't imagine life without Molly. She and Jennifer were the meaning of my life, and without them I could not be myself. I don't think I ever forgave Molly, but she was a good wife and mother, and I allowed myself to forget about her betrayal. She gave me no further reason to doubt, then or later, although I reminded myself that she did it once. We moved on and everything was fine. We both adored Jennifer, and when old thoughts popped into my head, I would simply work more, play with my daughter, or take Molly to a restaurant and try to forget everything. We had a wonderful sex life, and Molly began to do things for me that she had never done before. She was willing to try anything I suggested and never complained about anything. I didn't abuse it, but it was still quite enjoyable. She seemed to like it too. I knew that part of her behavior was out of guilt, but it seemed sincere, and I wanted to believe that it was so. I hoped that this would help us both forget about her affair with Ron. As it turned out from my questioning of Davis, they dated for a short time, and they did not have any special frills in sex. He even stated that she allegedly used him more than he used her, that she only wanted traditional sex, and she refused to even think about pleasing him. He admitted that it annoyed him, but she was adamant. I decided that now that Molly was trying bolder things with me, she wanted to push away the memories of Ron and bring new sensations into our marriage. We lived like this until the moment when Jennifer was only a week away from coming of age. Molly. After that day when Jim said that everything was now going right for him, our lives returned to normal and we enjoyed each other and our daughter. We even did things we'd never done before, traveled to new places, and tried new things in bed. I never refused Jim anything, and he never asked for anything I didn't want. The variety we had made our closeness truly great. I loved making love to my husband and loved making him happy. We lived like this until the day, a week before Jennifer's 18th birthday, Ron Davis called me. He was in Cleveland and wanted to meet. I refused and hung up. I was shaking and started crying. I thought it was all in the past and I would never have to deal with Jennifer's question again. After all, Jennifer will soon turn 18, she will leave to study, and Jim will never know. I convinced myself a long time ago that it was all over. Damn Ron. The next day he called again and said that he would continue to call until I agreed to meet. Apparently, he just needs to talk about Jennifer. I finally listened to him and agreed. He told us where he was staying, and we agreed to meet the next day, Monday. I collected a few photos, a couple of videos from past birthdays, and some other memories to show him. I had no intention of introducing him to my daughter or allowing her to communicate with him, and she certainly didn't want Jim to find out anything. The idea flashed through my head to even hire one of our friends to scare him or even kill him if necessary. I knew all of Jim's friends and could ask one of them to solve the problem without going into details. Maybe I could talk Tiny into it. Of course, murder is a last resort, but it was already on my mind. And I had no doubt that I would do this if he threatened my family. I decided for myself that I could do this if Ron had no other choice. There were a lot of thoughts, all of them were spinning in my head while I was driving to the meeting at the motel. It was reminiscent of the times Ron and I would meet for a quickie while he was passing through town. I remembered this with a feeling of nausea in my stomach. How could I have been such a fool then? But now I had a completely different conversation in mind. When I finally calmed down, I went to the right number. Ron opened the door to my knock and reached out to hug me and kiss me to say hello. I pulled his hands away and said that there was no place for any tenderness here, let him forget. He looked shocked, but stepped back and let me inside. The first thing I told him was, I will not tolerate the slightest familiarity, and if he even tries anything, I will leave immediately. He looked at me and sat down on one of the chairs at the small table in this dark, dreary room. He agreed without objection. I spent the next hour telling Ron about Jennifer. I calmed down and simply talked about my love for my daughter. He listened and only asked a couple of questions. I mentioned that Jennifer is devoted to both me and Jim. That Jim is her father, and I won't let anyone or anything come between them. I reminded Ron that I have many acquaintances from unreliable circles through Jim's business, and if anything happens, he will regret it. I asked if he understood what I was talking about. He nodded. I showed him several photos of Jennifer with her friends, with Jim and with me. I turned on a video from her early birthdays so that he could feel her energy, her love for life. He looked very sad, and I understood that he was seeing a daughter with whom he had no chance to meet or spend time. But I did not feel sympathy for him because he himself, having a family and 3 daughters, forgot about them every time he was with me. Before I left, I told Ron that he was to have no contact with Jennifer under any circumstances until I gave my permission. Jim knows nothing about him and has no idea that he is not Jennifer's biological father. I won't let Ron interfere with our family as long as it hurts Jim. He said that he would stay in the city for another week. If something suddenly changed, I could call him. I walked out and didn't look back. On the way home, I told myself that I would never let Ron come into our lives. Jim and I are doing well, but Jennifer is leaving for college in September. Maybe one day I'll figure out a way to let Ron see his daughter without breaking up the family, but not yet. And who will benefit from this? I saw no reason to tell Jim about Ron. Why hurt him and ruin 17 years of a wonderful family life? I myself have learned to live with this burden and will take it with me to the grave if everything remains as it is now. There is no point in shifting it to others. I pushed thoughts of Ron out of my mind, thinking about Jennifer's upcoming birthday, graduation, all the joys that were in my life, a life that I loved and was not going to give up without a fight. Jim. Little did I remember that I was paying Woody Tree an annual fee, while Tiny made sure that Woody kept Ron Davis in his sights. It turns out that every month or two, for the first year for sure, and then once a year, Woody sent a summary of how Ron was doing. He contacted someone in the city where Davis now lived and followed his life through phone records and credit card movements. Ron still used the same maps when traveling, so Woody knew every time he was in Cleveland and alerted Tiny immediately. Tiny usually tracked him down, hoping that Ron would try to contact Molly, but that didn't happen. Until the week before Jennifer's birthday. When Woody told Tiny that Davis had arrived, Tiny followed him to the Holiday Inn. Tiny tracked his license plate and was on duty when he saw Molly's car, and then Molly herself. She parked and entered the building. She walked straight to Ron's room and knocked. Tiny saw Ron open the door and stretch out his arms, apparently to hug her. Molly waved him off, and a feeling of relief awoke in him. But it quickly passed because Molly didn't come out for another 2 hours. Only after all this time did she come out, get into the car, and drive away. Ron didn't come out for another hour after that. Tiny told me what he had seen, with pain in his eyes. He admitted that he did not know what was happening there behind the closed door, but Molly remained in the room for more than 2 hours. Tiny added that Davis himself came out only an hour after she left. "What are you going to do, boss?" he asked, looking at me worriedly. I understood that he was afraid that I might do something stupid. "Don't forget, you have a daughter who loves you and a wife who, in spite of everything, also loves you." I realized that I would have to tell Jennifer the truth about who her real father was, and I also realized that I could no longer live with Molly if she was still associated with this scum. But I wasn't sure our marriage still existed. And what will I do if not? How to live without Molly? Paradox. I loved her so much that her actions, she herself, controlled my life. She made me happy and could destroy me overnight without even realizing it. Molly was everything to me, and I pushed her betrayal into the past so long ago, learning to live again. All these years, she gave me no reason to be disappointed, and I could swear my life on her love. Looks like my bet might be a loser. I decided I needed to make a plan. I brought all the surviving documents regarding the Ron Davis story to my lawyer and laid out the whole vile truth. He asked what I wanted. I said that I wanted to start divorce proceedings, given that Jennifer was already an adult. But I want to get a divorce peacefully so that this doesn't turn into a squabble. Jennifer is already settled and doesn't need anything from us financially. The lawyer said that everything will be ready by the end of the week, and Jennifer's birthday is on Friday. Then I prepared a folder for Jennifer, copies of the paternity test results, copies of Ron's renunciation of parental rights, and copies of my adoption. I checked her investment account, which Molly and I had registered under Jennifer's name, and everything was fine there. This is how I celebrated Jennifer's 18th birthday, not understanding whether this day would be the end of my usual life. I had no idea how she would react to learning that I was not her biological father or how she would accept her mother's betrayal. I was afraid that Jennifer would hate me for what I was up to now, but I had no choice. I could not continue to live in ignorance. I needed to do this if only for my peace of mind. Time will show. Jennifer. After Dad left, I sat down at the table and tried to comprehend everything I had heard that evening. It was clear that my mother knew about my biological father and that she did not know that my father knew too. I wondered how long Dad had known about this and why Mom didn't tell him. Why did she even cheat on Dad so long ago? After all, this happened almost immediately after their wedding, and they, in theory, were supposed to be madly in love. At least that's what I thought. Besides, Mom, as far as I knew, loved Dad with all her heart. I saw how they behaved with each other, heard how she talked to him and about him with her friends, and how they treated each other. I have never noticed any problems between them in my life. I knew what I wanted to do. I called Tiny and asked him to pick me up early the next morning. He asked if I was going to buy a car, and I said we were going to meet my biological father. Damn it, he already knew about him. He said, "Well, apparently the boss told you about him, right, T-double?" I asked. "So he told you about this a long time ago. How long do you know, or is this some kind of secret known to everyone? Was I the only one who didn't know?" "No, not all. Now only you, me, Ollie, and your dad know. And, of course, little mommy. He told us when he first found out himself, and we were with him when he went to talk to that guy, Ron." Tiny seemed to have an even easier time talking to me about it. He asked what we would do. Said that probably beating him or killing him is not what Dad wants. I said I just wanted to talk to him and understand the whole truth. I'm not going to get to know him, start a relationship, or anything else, but I need the truth about what happened 18 or 19 years ago. I want to meet him at the motel restaurant and go alone first. When I sit down and see him, I want you and Ollie to come in and sit opposite us. He agreed and said that they would come for me at 8 a.m. Instead of sorting things out with my mom tonight, I packed my bag for the night and went to my best friend Becky. She was happy to accommodate me and didn't really ask me what happened. I just told her about the car and about the account that Mom and Dad opened for me, but I didn't go into further detail. She only said that my mother and I almost had a fight, and in order not to say anything stupid, I decided to cool off in another place. She also said that Dad was away on business and would be gone for some time. Becky took it calmly, and I was happy to tell her about the car. The bill amazed her, but she said that we are already rich, so it's just my legal one. I laughed with her and calmed down a little. I called the number in the envelope my dad gave me and asked to speak to Mr. Ron Davis. The receptionist switched me over and Ron answered. I introduced myself and said that I would like to meet him tomorrow morning at about 8:15 at the Holiday Inn restaurant where he was staying. He quickly agreed, asking if Dad knew I was calling. I said that he was the one who gave me the number to contact. Ron was clearly surprised, hesitated, and then said that he would be waiting for me at the restaurant. I suggested that he leave his name with the waitress, since I didn't recognize his face. He agreed. Everything was ready for tomorrow. I called my dad and talked to him for a while, but didn't tell him what I was up to. She just said that Tiny and Ollie would pick me up in the morning as planned, and that I would call him later to tell him what I was up to. He asked how Mom was doing, and I said I was staying at Becky's tonight. He asked if this was a good idea, considering that Mom might need support. I replied that I didn't think it was worth talking to her now, because I was angry with her. He finally agreed and asked if I had told her where I was. I said no, but I'll call as soon as I hang up. I called, but my mom didn't answer, so I left a message saying where I was. That was all I was ready for today. At exactly 8 o'clock, Tiny and Ollie arrived at Becky's house. Ollie knocked on the door and Becky answered. Hello, Ollie. How are you? Ollie leaned over, grabbed Becky around the waist, lifted her up, and kissed her on the forehead. How's my second favorite girl this morning? Becky giggled like a little girl. Put me down, gorilla. Jen, your car has arrived. Come on, grab a car and take me for a ride to meet some cool guys. It's not that you're not great, Ollie, but you're a little old for me. Ollie just smiled at her with real warmth. Becky liked him, and Becky was like a sister to me, and that was enough for him. Are you ready, T-Double? He asked when I went downstairs. I climbed into the back seat of our ever-pumped Ford F-250, which Tiny always drove, and we headed to the motel. The journey took about 10 minutes, and I arrived just in time. I once again discussed the plan with the guys. First I go alone, sit down with Ron Davis, then they come in behind me and sit opposite me. I don't want them to interfere, but I hoped that he would recognize them and it would encourage him to tell the truth. They agreed and found the whole situation funny. He's probably going to shit his pants now, Tiny said. Ollie added that he would be glad to help shake everything unnecessary out of him, but would not do anything without my permission. I entered the restaurant at exactly 8:15. There was a man standing at the entrance who immediately asked if I was Jennifer. I said yes, and he introduced himself as Ron Davis. He extended his hand to me, and although I didn't really want to touch him, I shook it for a second so as not to look impolite. The waitress took us to a table by the window, and I looked outside to see Tiny waiting in the car. I showed him 5 minutes on my fingers, and he nodded. Then I turned my gaze to the man sitting across from me, realizing that half of my genetic code was his. He made no impression. He was not bad in appearance, dark-skinned, about my father's age, but shorter than I expected, and did not seem to keep himself in good shape. Overall, I was disappointed. I thought that the person Mom cheated on Dad with must be special. Compared to my father, this guy seemed like a loser, and I suddenly felt a little better from the understanding of why I came here in the first place. Well, I've seen your photos, but you're even more beautiful in real life, he began. I wanted to meet you, but your mother asked me not to call you or look for a meeting when we saw each other on Monday. I thought she changed her mind and told your father I was in town. He asked with a slight grin. I don't know what Mom told you, but she didn't talk to Dad about you. She doesn't even know that he knows about your existence. Dad gave me the number of your house and the hotel. He knew you were in town, and he knew it from the moment you arrived, I said. He instantly turned pale, and his grin disappeared. We then agreed with your dad that I would not contact you until you turned 18. It seems like you turned yesterday. He looked tense and twitchy. I told him that my dad actually said that once I turned 18, it was my decision whether to look for dates or not. He calmed down a little, and then Tiny and Ollie came in. "Hello, T-Double, nice to see you here. Who is this sitting opposite you?" Tiny asked. "Listen, Ollie, isn't he the idiot we once escorted out of the city?" Ollie just looked at Ron with his signature, sinister smile, which he usually used when he wanted to intimidate another poor guy. Everything started to get out of control, and I intervened. "Uncle Ramon, you promised to just sit aside and not interfere. Please, you and Uncle Alular sit at another table. I will talk to this man." Ollie took Tiny by the shoulder and reminded her that they had promised to stay out of the way. They walked over to the counter and sat down, still looking at us. During this time, Ron Davis tried to attract as little attention as possible. It was obvious that he was afraid of these two. He watched them as they walked away. "Why did you call them uncles? It's just a couple of thugs who work for your father. I talked to them 18 years ago, and I don't want to see them anymore. I think you should be careful who you hang around with," he said. I looked at him closely. "These two thugs, as you say, are my friends, and they have always been there for as long as I can remember. They are here at my request and will not interfere while we speak. I need the truth about what happened between you and my mom. If you refuse to talk, I will tell them that I don't like him, and they will play with you as they want." I smiled at him. "You may be my biological father, but in reality, I am the daughter of my real father. I like these thugs and other guys like them. I don't mind a little pressure if it's necessary to achieve my goal. I wouldn't think for a second about asking them to take you somewhere where I would never see you again. My family is now in crisis because of you. My dad left my mom because of you, and I could lose the family I loved for 18 years, again because of you. I don't know you, but I already hate you. So just look at these two sitting there and answer my questions." My face turned red and I was out of breath. And then Tiny and Ollie stood up, but I raised my hand, indicating that they should sit back down. Ron Davis looked at me like I was crazy. "I have nothing to do with your father leaving your mother," he said. "There's no reason to hate me because I didn't do anything wrong. I haven't seen or contacted your mom since I left 17 years ago. I just wanted to know how you grew up and hoped to establish contact with the daughter I've never met. I only left because your father threatened me and actually forced me to leave, although I myself wanted to stay. What happened between me and your mother a long time ago has nothing to do with their current relationship. If they are going through a crisis, it is not my fault." I became even more angry. "Dad always taught me to respect people until they give me a reason to do otherwise. You lost my respect when you didn't respect my mom and Dad's marriage. Yes, Mom herself allowed this to happen, but you yourself understood what you were doing and went for it consciously. When you did this, you disrespected my dad, my mom, and me. Besides, when you left, it was not because you wanted to, but because you turned out to be a coward. You were afraid to take responsibility for your actions and gave up everything to save your own marriage. You devalued my parents' marriage, and when it came to your wife, you chickened out and ran away like a scared dog. You are a coward and a traitor." I calmed down a little after this emotional explosion and said, "Now I want to know what exactly happened 18 years ago. How did this happen and where was my dad at that time? Did you meet your mom under his nose? Did you sleep in his bed? Was this just some dirty quickie to prove that you are better than my dad? Did your mother enjoy it? Were you both laughing at him while you were making me?" At that moment, I couldn't stand it and burst into tears, dropping my head on the table. Ollie immediately came over, sat down next to me and hugged me, while throwing a murderous look at Ron. He just looked at us both with some kind of sad expression, saying nothing, while I sobbed on Ollie's chest. Finally, Ron asked Ollie to return to the counter. "I'll tell her everything she needs to know, and I won't hurt her beyond what the truth might cause. She wants to know and has a right to it." Ollie nodded and returned to the counter next to Tiny. They both looked at me with tears in their eyes, realizing that I needed to hear the truth. "I met your mother 2 years before she met your father," Ron began to tell. "I was married, she knew that. We met about every 6 to 8 weeks, once or twice, to hook up. That's all. No feelings, no relationships. She didn't like going on dates and was constantly busy. I was traveling and didn't see my wife for a long time. It turned out that I was comfortable, and so was she, and that was all. Nothing serious. We hardly spoke, except for work matters. Molly always asked about my wife, knew that she knew nothing, and always seemed sad when I confirmed that my wife knew nothing. But despite this, she continued to date me. Then everything changed when she met your father in the hospital. She started avoiding me if I came into town and canceling our meetings. We only saw each other a couple of times when your dad was still going on business trips and was away for a long time. But that was before their wedding. Basically, we only slept together once after she met your father, and that was early in their relationship, before marriage. He fell silent and asked if I was okay. I nodded, and he continued. After they got married, we dated, but there was no sex. I continued to persuade her when I arrived at the hospital, but she firmly refused and said that it's all over. However, one day, when your father left for a long time, I think he had problems in one of the workshops, and he left for 2 weeks, and then another week until he found a new manager. I arrived at the hospital a day earlier than usual. I decided to take a risk and went to the very back room where we usually met. Your mom was there. I approached her as I had done before. Let me just say that we slept the same way we had done it many times before. But this time, when it was over, Molly burst into tears. I asked what happened, and she said that she promised herself she would never do it again. But she felt so bad without Jim. She missed him, thought about him, and at some point didn't even realize that it wasn't him until it was all over. And then it seemed to hit her, and she realized what had happened and burst into tears. I tried to console her, but she just yelled at me to get out and leave her alone. She actually screamed. I left, and that was the last time we were together. I swear to God. As Ron talked, I began to realize that the situation, which I had thought was a dirty affair, was a little different. If Ron isn't lying, they slept only once after her wedding, in a state where Mom missed Dad terribly and almost confused Ron with him. And apparently, my mother almost immediately regretted it and immediately stopped everything. I now needed to talk to my mother to find out her version. How did Dad find out about your affair? I asked Ron. He replied that he didn't know for sure his father never told him. He just came to me and said that he knew about our connection, that you were my biological daughter, which, by the way, I had no idea about. He told me never to see Molly again and advised me to leave town. He even offered to buy my business if I didn't find another buyer, but I did. Your dad is a man of his word. He did not try to deceive or take revenge, except for convincing me to leave. When he first arrived, these two, he nodded towards Tiny and Ollie, were with him. He made it clear that they would deal with me if we did not find a compromise. The way he looked was simply terrifying. And then I realized that angering your father is a big mistake. I sold the business and moved my family to Michigan, closer to my wife's sister. We have been living there ever since. I sat silently, digesting everything I heard. Finally, I asked the last question. What were you and Mom doing in the motel room on Monday? I have to know everything, so be honest for the first time in your life. His answer surprised me. We talked about you. She showed me pictures of you, played a couple of recordings from your early birthdays, talked about awards and how your life is going now. I know you're going to Miami this fall, and I know about some surprises your mom and dad have planned for your birthday. Molly said she'll let me know where you'll be studying and how to contact you, but I can't call you or tell you who I am yet. She assured that Jim does not know about this and does not even realize that he is not your biological father. I realized that Jim never told her he knew everything. It shocked me. And apparently, thinking about him, I also didn't tell Molly that he knew. I don't even know why. Maybe at some point the thought of blackmail flashed through, but I decided not to play with your father. Then we talked a little more about my family, about my daughters, and she left. She said that she wanted to talk to Jim herself, and then she would let me know when she could see each other. I told her that I would be in town for another week, that I would be visiting friends, and she promised to let me know before I left. Ron stopped and looked at me. How are you? Is that all you wanted to know? Understand that your mom and I didn't do anything wrong on Monday, and she certainly doesn't deserve what your dad is doing now, unless he's been holding a grudge against her and me all this time for what happened 18 years ago. As for you, he continued, I would like to get to know you, even show you to my daughters. I have 3 adult daughters, all married. They already have children of their own. I sat in silence for several minutes, digesting everything that was said. According to Ron, it was cheating, but only once after the wedding, and I became a reminder to Dad of Mom's actions. I didn't know how to correct the situation, but I knew for sure that I had to do it. Now everything is clear to me, I said. And remember, I don't have the slightest desire to know more about you than I already know. I said that I don't respect the person who did that. You disrespected my father by dating his future wife. You disrespected my mother by continuing to pursue her even after marriage. You disrespected neither your wife nor your daughters, cheating on them for years. As a result, I have absolutely nothing else to talk to you about. Mom is another matter. I love her. She is my mother and is still married to a man who is a real father to me. I will love them both forever. And you are the one who caused me and my family so much grief. The best thing I can do for you is to let you go without the help of Tiny and Ollie. Ron seemed about to object, but when I stood up and called my bodyguards, he changed his mind. When Tiny and Ollie approached me, I announced that Ron was leaving back to Michigan tomorrow, and she looked at Ron. I think that's what you're planning, right? He just nodded and looked away. The 3 of us left the restaurant. I left a piece of my past there and didn't regret it a bit. On the way, I told Tiny and Ollie what Ron told me about the meeting on Monday. She said that now she needs to find her father and explained that nothing happened between her mother and Ron, and there is no reason to continue the divorce. Tiny almost cried when I told him. He kept repeating, "It's my fault. I ruined everything. If I hadn't told your father that she was meeting Ron at the motel, or at least talked to baby mommy first, nothing would have happened." I took his hands in mine. Remember, all of this is not your fault. Don't forget that Mom started this herself 20 years ago. She started an affair with a married man, and that's why we came to this moment. And you just did what you thought was necessary to protect Dad. That's it. At this point, I found out the truth. Now I just had to figure out how to save my family. Tiny stopped crying and pulled himself together. We need to get to your father before he does something stupid. He wouldn't hurt Molly, but he might do something stupid to himself. He was very depressed about it all. I have his phone number. I can call him and arrange for us to meet somewhere. You too will have to be there for him to listen to everything I have to say. I looked at both of them to make sure they supported me in this. Jim, I spent that evening after my birthday in a suite at the Marriott Hotel downtown. It had everything I needed for a few days, and I needed those few days to begin divorce proceedings and end my marriage. I already had a lawyer, documents were prepared, and we will file them in court on Monday. I gave Jennifer everything she needed, and the terms I offered in the divorce petition were more than fair for Molly. She will never need money and will be able to go wherever she wants and do whatever she wants. I was almost sure that she would not marry Ron Davis. Perhaps his wife would have something to say about it. Moreover, I knew almost nothing about the woman whom I thought I knew as well as myself. Saturday came and went. I thought back on the last 17 years I spent with Molly and Jennifer. Never in all these years did I suspect that Molly might still have feelings for the man she slept with long ago. I would bet all my money that she had forgotten him a long time ago and never wanted to see him again. I remembered a conversation with Ron Davis when we met one day. He explained what their affair was about, and I believed that Molly was most likely glad that it was all over and her mistakes were in the past. Why would she, one wonders, return to this? What could she possibly get out of this latest fling with this piece of shit? According to him, she never enjoyed sex with him. What was she looking for that I couldn't give her? I leaned back on the bed and covered my eyes with my hand. I cried unashamedly until I fell asleep. I had no dreams and woke up the next morning without any hope for the future, only with a feeling of loneliness and sadness. I felt empty and didn't want to start a new day, and then the phone rang. Hello? Dad, it's me. I need to talk to you as soon as possible. Where are you? And do you know that it's not even 7:30 in the morning? And what do you want to talk about? I haven't spoken to your mother and haven't left the room since my arrival. He clearly didn't want to get involved in a conversation with his daughter at that moment. Just please agree to meet with me. Tell me where to come, I will come. I don't want to meet or talk to anyone right now. You understand. Maybe we can wait and talk next week? Jennifer begged him until he finally agreed to meet her at Applebee's on Broad Street at about 1:30. He lay back on the bed and dozed until it was time to get up and eat breakfast. But he didn't go to breakfast either. He ordered food to his room. I wanted to be alone a little longer before the meeting. After talking with her father, Jennifer walked from Becky's house to her place to talk to her mother. It's only been 36 hours since her life was turned upside down. She was angry at her mother, angry at Ron Davis, and angry at her father for not talking to her or Molly before he did what he did. Damn, it's so like him to do everything himself without devoting them, just to protect them, you see, and not think that they can take care of themselves. She used the new key her mother gave her for her birthday on Friday to open the front door. It was unusual for her to enter the house, as if it was a stranger's house, where she had never been. It seemed to her that she did not know the woman whom she had called mother all her life. She entered. Molly stood in the kitchen doorway and saw her daughter enter the house. Where have you been for the last 2 days? I went crazy with worry when you didn't want to talk to me. Why didn't you call yesterday? Molly looked like she hadn't slept for days. Her usually beautiful hair was now tangled and dull. Her face was pale, and without makeup, she wore a housecoat instead of clothes, and her usually sparkling eyes were empty and red. She stood in the kitchen, leaning on the counter. I needed to think about everything I heard on Friday night after dinner. Everything was so good, and then in an instant, it turned into a living hell. I couldn't believe you were lying to Dad and me all this time. I still wouldn't have believed it if Dad hadn't told me the facts, and if I hadn't talked to that idiot who turned out to be my biological father. Hearing this, Molly felt like she had received a slap in the face. What do you mean you talked to him? That's what it means. Yesterday, I went to the same hotel you went to on Monday and talked to Mr. Davis. I took Tiny and Ollie with me, so I was in no danger. I waited for her to start yelling at me, but instead she sank into a chair and began to sob. I looked at her for a minute, then walked over, hugged her, and held her close while she cried. When she calmed down, I sat down opposite her and waited for what she would say. I never wanted you or your father to know about this. From the day you were born, I knew that Jim was not your father, and I swore to myself that none of you would know the truth. I did everything I could to hide it and threatened Ron that I would kill him if he ever contacted you. That same day, I made a vow to God that I would do everything I could to make our life with you and Jim happy and fulfilling for all of us. I did everything possible to prove to Jim how much I loved him, and I was sure that he believed me. I had no idea that your father knew the whole truth, and I didn't know that he adopted you. No matter how hard I try, I still don't understand why he did what he did and why he never talked to me about it. If he had asked me, I would have explained myself and tried to save our marriage, but with him realizing the whole truth. But it turns out that he was silent all this time and still stayed with me, although I betrayed him and was not honest with him. You may not believe this, but it would have been easier for both of us if we had just been sincere with each other all those years ago. The burden I have been carrying all this time is terrible. This is a weight that could have hurt someone I love with all my heart. The weight that he carried could only harm him because I already knew what I had done. Even when I betrayed him, your father showed nobility and I was a coward. Now I've lost him and I've lost the marriage that I value so much. I didn't have the courage to be honest, and now I'm paying for it in full. I can only hope that you don't hate me for everything I've done, but if you do, I'll understand. I listened to my mother with a sadness I had never felt before in my 18 years. Not because of the truth, not because of what she did, but because I understood. Our family cannot and should not be destroyed because of something that was not specifically planned and which my mother really regrets. She carried this burden all her married life, and Dad carried the same heavy burden. Both were afraid of losing what they now seemed ready to give up. At this thought, my sadness turned to anger. I want you to get up, clean yourself up, and get dressed. We'll go out to lunch, and I won't take no for an answer. I won't have you going out in public looking like a tramp, so put on something nice, and we'll go out to lunch together. We're going to Applebee's, and you get your favorite Cajun steak. I stood up and extended my hand to her. She looked at me, finally smiled, and stood up. Okay, if you need it, I'll go. I don't promise that I will be the best conversationalist, but I myself want to be with you. I keep forgetting that soon you will leave, and I won't have you at hand. With these words, she went upstairs to change clothes and clean up. I called Tiny and told her that my mom and I would arrive at Applebee's at 1:30, as planned. He promised to stand outside with Ollie if I needed help. I asked him to keep his cell phone handy in case I called. Molly woke up on Saturday morning to find no one home. She didn't know Jim had moved out, and she didn't know where Jennifer was. She didn't notice the blinking light on the answering machine until some time had passed. After looking around the bathroom and seeing that Jim's things were missing, she finally realized that he had left her. He left no note explaining his whereabouts, and his mobile phone was switched off. She called him all day and left messages, but he never called back. She realized that now everything depends only on him. If he wants to talk, he will contact him himself. She didn't know where Jennifer was, but she called Becky to see if she still had her daughter. Becky assured Jennifer that everything was fine and said that she left with Ollie about an hour ago. Looks like she was going to choose her own car. Becky chatted excitedly, and Molly just remained silent and listened. Molly finally got a word in and ended the conversation, sighing heavily again. Now she realized that her world had collapsed. Her daughter is avoiding her, her husband has left and is filing for divorce, and she has only herself to blame for this. She cheated, she lied, she didn't trust Jim enough to tell him the truth, and now she's paying for it. All day she either cried or slept, avoiding any activities or people. Neither Jim nor Jennifer ever called. She didn't know how to get in touch with Jim, and Jennifer clearly didn't want to talk to her. She tried calling Becky again, but was told that Jennifer didn't want to talk to her mother right now. She gave up, went upstairs, went to bed, and lay there all day and night. The next Sunday morning at dawn, she went down to the kitchen to drink coffee. She had to at least try to do something. Maybe she should have called a lawyer or called Tiny, Ollie, or even Tony to see if they had any ideas on what to do next. While she was contemplating her future, the front door opened and Jennifer entered the house. Jennifer and Molly arrived at Applebee's just before 1:30. Jennifer carefully planned everything so that her parents would not see each other before she arrived, because she knew her father and knew that he would come in advance to wait. He was never late. Looking around, Jennifer saw that her father was sitting in a booth by the window with his back to the entrance, just what he needed. She told the waitress that their companion was already waiting and headed there with her mother. She took her mother's hand and led her down the aisle to the booth where Jim was sitting. "Hello, Dad. Are you waiting for me?" Jennifer turned to her father, standing in front of her mother so that he could only see her at first. He smiled and stood up to greet her when he suddenly noticed Molly. She, in turn, was dumbfounded when she saw him. She did not suspect that her daughter had arranged this meeting. Both froze, not knowing what to say or how to behave. "Dad, Mom, sit with me," Jennifer said, and pushed her mother into the seat opposite her father, and she sat down next to Molly. "Dad, if you try to leave, Tiny won't let you out. He's waiting right outside the door. If you look out the window, you'll see that I'm not kidding." Jennifer looked at both of them sternly. "There are things that need to be spoken out and made clear, and I won't let this go any further. I will not let my family be destroyed because of lies or stupidity. You are too important to me for me to let something like that happen." Tears welled up in her eyes as she spoke these words. "Jennifer, I don't know what to say to make you understand that I can't live with your mother anymore, knowing what I know about her feelings for your biological father," Jim said, looking at Molly. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. She has no feelings for Ron Davis and wants nothing to do with him. Me too. But that's another topic. What happened on Monday is not what you think." She turned to Molly. "Finally, tell him the truth, at least once in your life." Molly looked at Jim before speaking. "The first thing you should know is that I had no idea that you knew that Ron is Jennifer's biological father. I only acted this way because I thought that if I could hide the truth, I would save both of you from pain. Yes, my motives were not the most correct, but I wanted to protect you. I haven't talked to Ron Davis for over 17 years. I hoped that silence would prevent the truth from surfacing and that we could move on with our lives, keeping our family in love and happiness. I was going to take this secret with me to the grave to spare you the pain. But 2 weeks ago, he called. I told him to leave me and my family alone. He did not let up, saying that he would not leave until he saw and talked to his daughter. In the end, I agreed to meet him at the hotel. I had a lot of thoughts. I thought about calling Tiny to finish him off. I thought that if Ron disappeared, we would be safe. I thought about you, about our family, about Jennifer and her future. In the end, I decided that I would try to calm him down. I would show him photographs, talk about you, about Jennifer, and if necessary, intimidate him by telling his wife and daughters everything so that he would leave once and for all. Murder could turn against me and deprive me of what I tried so hard to protect. At the mention of wanting to kill Ron Davis, it began to dawn on Jim how desperately Molly was trying to protect her family. However, he wanted to know what exactly happened at the motel back then. I went to his room, which he called. He acted as if nothing had changed on his end, and we could pick up where we left off. I was even glad, because it gave me a reason to throw out my rage. I punched him in the face as hard as I could and told him to stay away from me. He was stunned, but retreated. I brought him photos of the three of us and notes from birthday parties. I want you to know that all the photos and videos were only about the three of us. I wanted him to see you with your father so that he would understand that we are a family and he does not belong in it. I said that Jennifer is who she is because of her father, and Ron has nothing to do with it. I spent more than 2 hours with him, but time did not matter to me. When I started talking about you and our family over all these years, I just couldn't stop. I talked and talked about how much love and respect we have for each other. She talked until she ran out of words. When I finished, it became clear to Ron that he had no place in my life or in Jennifer's life. Before he left, he said that he wanted to call you, see you, and perhaps get to know you better, and also introduce you to his daughters. I replied that he would not contact you until I gave my permission. I said that otherwise I would take action, and he understood what I meant. I made it clear that from this day on, he must forget about my existence. I was worried that I would have to find a way to warn you if he suddenly found a way to contact you, but I decided to put it off until later. That's all. Jim, I regret not trusting you. I regret that I didn't tell you the truth as soon as I found out about the pregnancy. As we grew and strengthened our marriage, there were many times when I considered confessing everything. But my only reason for remaining silent was because I believed that if I alone bear the weight of this truth, you will be protected from the pain that it will bring. Now I understand how stupid I was. You knew all this time and suffered because I deliberately lied and misled you. My betrayal was aggravated by my own ignorance and arrogance. I understand why you want a divorce, and I will not object to you in anything. I didn't even read your lawsuit, but everything you wrote there suits me. While her mother spoke, Jennifer remained silent and looked at her father. He was outwardly impenetrable, but did not take his eyes off Molly. She waited for him to say. She did not intend to let him escape responsibility, because he was as much to blame as his mother. Both had to admit it, and she was ready to make them face the truth. I wanted a divorce because I thought you spent all this time with that bastard, and you were having an affair again. Jim broke the silence. And I also thought that you still had feelings for him. So I was wrong. Yes, I was wrong. I never loved him and did not want any relationship with him. I once used it for sex so as not to enter into a serious relationship with anyone. He was a convenient option, and I am still ashamed that he was a married man. This has haunted me all these years. The only time we had sex after you and I got married was when I was in my head with you, and Ron took advantage of the moment. You then went away for a long time with Tony and Tiny. He came ahead of time. I didn't even realize what I was doing until it was too late. You probably remember that you and I were going to have a baby in July. I decided to stop taking the pills early because I read that sometimes it can take up to 6 months before everything is restored. I didn't want to put it off. And just then you were on that long business trip and Ron arrived earlier. At that moment, I was thinking about you, not about him. I have something to say, Jennifer added. You both made mistakes. Mom, you have two of them. First, an affair with a married man, which has now led to such terrible consequences, and then you were not honest with Dad, the man who loves you more than life itself. Dad, your mistake is that you didn't talk to your mom when you found out that I'm not your biological daughter. You should have treated her with respect, given her the opportunity to explain herself, and tell her how everything happened, even if she was wrong. I love you both, and I'm not going to put up with the fact that you are now destroying your family. Tiny swore that he wouldn't let you break up until you solved all your problems. I need to see if you're ready to try again. Jennifer paused and looked at her father, clenching her fists under the table. She held her breath. Jim looked at Molly. There's nothing to find out here. I love you more than I can express, and I can't imagine my life without you. I knew everything about your novel, even when I found out that Jennifer was not my own daughter, and I knew from Ron himself that you didn't love him. He himself said that you used him and did not have feelings for him. He knew that I forbade him from having contact with both you and Jennifer until she came of age. He almost ruined it by contacting you earlier. I don't want to continue filing the divorce. I was just overwhelmed with feelings of resentment, and like a fool, I tried to hit back to hurt you as much as I thought you did to me. Now I realize that I was wrong, and I ask you for forgiveness. Jennifer reminded me that we are equally guilty of hiding the truth. Molly simply reached out and took Jim's hand. I love you. I love you and always have, he answered and smiled, looking at Molly and then turned to Jennifer. We owe you so much. Thank you for saving me from a terrible mistake. Jim stood up, hugged his daughter, and kissed her forehead. Let's go home, okay? All three went out together to continue living the same way as before she came of age until that special day, the day of her 18th birthday. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.